Everyone, welcome to the day 3 of the Paris Freestyle event. My name is International Master Alex Ostrovsky, and I'm joined today by the wonderful Women's FIDE Master Maria Emilianova. And we are here for the final 8, the top 8, I should say, the knockout portion, day 1 of the classical event. How are you doing this lovely, I believe, afternoon, Maria?
Yeah, it is afternoon for me, but for the rest of you, most of you guys here in the chat, it's morning. Very good morning, very early morning. Glad to have you here. It will be a wonderful day. We see that the players are just finishing discussing the position, and the position looks really interesting. We have the two kings and queens bishops. They are the center of the position. So I think the dynamics will be really, really exciting.
Yeah, we also have a new time control today, right? The past couple of days we've had the rapid portion of the event. The players were duking it out in the 10+10 time control. Now we have 90+30. We should also point out that the matchups are fixed. We have a match between Arjun Erigaisian and Hikaru Nakamura. Yesterday, Maria, me and you had the pleasure of calling the games, but we didn't have a chance to see the players picking their opponents. Well, the picks have been set, and I believe that Hikaru, if I read correctly, Arjun didn't really pick him because Arjun got 4th place. So the first 3 players, Magnus and
Nobody
Nepo and
wanted to choose
Nordebek,
Hikaru.
yeah, no one wanted to choose Hikaru out of the player pool. So Arjun was like, well, I have an easy choice. There's only one player left. And that's how we arrived to the following matchup.
Yeah, sometimes it's better to leave things to the fate. But yeah, there was no Javahir Sindarov there to make such a bold, but in the end, correct decision. It worked for Sindarov. But yeah, everybody was surprised, including Magnus, including the world champion. Everyone was shocked at the winner in Weissenhaus. But yeah, here I guess the picks are a bit more expectable.
Yeah, I'm looking at the pairings as well. So Vincent Keimer was picked first again by Jan Nepomniachtchi. I think yesterday you were asking, who's going to pick who? And I said, I think he's just going to pick Vincent, right? It's like he's still the lowest rated, but he is the defending champion, I guess you could say. Then we had Magnus Carlsen and Nordebek Abdusatorov. Actually, Nordebek was picked by Magnus, I just remember, although Nordebek was in the top 4 for most of the day yesterday. He lost the last round, and I think he ended up in 5th. And then third, we have MVL, Maxime Bashir-Legraf, the hometown hero, placed Fabiano Caruana, and now we have Arjun Hikaru. So yeah, very matchups on all boards, right, are super, super serious. You might think, oh, Vince is the lowest one, 27-18, and this is the guy who won the whole thing just recently. So it will not be any easy pairings here.
No, of course, no one of these players is an easy pairing per se. And of course, Vincent did win the previous event, but that doesn't mean that he's automatically a favorite. Obviously, all of the players will take him way more seriously this time. But also, Jan Nepomniachtchi barely did not qualify. Like I think he was the first runner-up after Sindarov in the qualifiers for the first event. So he didn't make it to Weissenhaus. So he also can say, well, I was not here last time, so why should I not pick Vincent? Because I can. But also it was more or less maybe the elimination process, whom you don't want to play more than the others. And I guess Vincent is an obvious choice for Jan.
And also for Jan and Magnus, I think they were very convincing in the rapid portion, the qualifier portion of the match. As we see a handshake between Arjun and Hikaru, they will start in a moment as Arjun ponders his first move. But yeah, I was going to say those guys, obviously they're always confident. They're some of the best players in the world, the best players in the world, and they were stomping the field. But this is a whole different ballgame. We are going to see a lot more in-depth thinking, of course, due to the time control. And I saw the analysis from the players, of course, as we've seen time and time again. They do have a little bit of time to discuss the positions prior to the game. So it seems like the strategy in these types of positions, the first move may be something like F4 or G4 in order to activate a lot of these pieces. For example, with the move F4, you might open up the bishop, you might open up the queen, you might open up the rook. So we'll see how the players decide to go about this. But yeah, it's very interesting. I think I've seen this before from said by I believe Magnus, where he was saying he would prefer actually to play the freestyle format with more time because the positions are so complicated and interesting. It's good to actually have, maybe 60, 90 minutes to figure all that out. And of course, a quirk, or not a quirk, a feature of this format, you don't need to know any opening theory, right? You just need to think for move one. So definitely having more time would be very welcome. And we have E4, best by test, on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. About the time format, I want to mention as well that 90 plus 30 is a classical format, and it makes you think that the game will be very slow. But you have to take two things to account. There is no added time after move 40. In some tournaments that we watch, there is even an extra 30 minutes after move 60. So that's like another 1 hour per each player. Plus, players usually come prepared for at least 20 moves deep, and they just skip through the opening very quickly. Here, they have to start thinking from move one, like Hikaru is taking his time to make the first move. Even Arjun took his time to make his first move. If we take all these things to account, I even can barely call this a classical format. It's more like maybe a slow rapid, because after the opening, they have usually maybe 20 minutes left for the the rest of the game. Yes, there is increment of 30 seconds, but it does not help that much. You are constantly in time pressure.
Yeah, we will. I was wondering, by the way, is Arjun thinking of move one, or I've seen his compatriot Vidit usually before the start of the game. He will take a moment. I believe he meditates. So I was like, is he thinking? Is he meditating? Maybe a little bit of both. But Hikaru, you know what he's doing? I think he's looking around a little bit, and we've seen
I
the
think he's
strategy.
waiting.
He's waiting because he's also checking out some of the other moves, maybe how some of the other games are going, and of course he's also thinking as well. But just to illustrate how you know, funny the opening stage can be. We get e4. That looks like a natural move. You open the bishop, you control some central space. Well, one of the top moves, according to the engine here, is not mirroring you with e5. I mean, that could be one of the top moves, but the very top move right now is a5, just completely ignoring your
Really?
opponent and pushing the rook pawn. And I believe the idea is just you're activating the rook. The king is already quite safe towards the edge of the board, not being in the center. So you perhaps do not need to be castling. But it's just kind of funny. I don't know how strong a5 is, but it just shows you the wealth of possibilities on move one.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if any of the players is considering a5. But yeah, during Weissenhaus, Hikaru honestly said, I believe that Fabiano is the most prepared player here to play this format. So why should I not wait to see what he moves, what is his move? So he is basically waiting, because the first move on Fabiano's board for white was the same e4 by MVL. But interestingly enough, Vincent and Magnus still have not moved, or at least I am not getting the moves from them.
Yes, I think we just got one from Vincent.
They've all found their way to their seats.
Something.
I think my sound disappeared for a second.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
see. We got the move. We got the players looking.
Huh. Vincent just
d4.
stood up and walked? No, or maybe they just sat down. Maybe they were analyzing longer.
Yeah, maybe they were prepping more.
Yeah. Yeah, like it looks like they just about sat down, and then I think Vincent made a move d4. And Magnus is still have not moved.
Yeah, this is quite funny. We have almost five minutes into the games, and we have one move on each board. So we'll certainly pick up the pace, as the games go on. But quite a funny start. Yeah, we have e4 on two boards, d4 on one board, and no Magnus, no Magnus move.
Yeah, I wonder what is Magnus thinking about. Or maybe there is just no transmission yet. Yeah, Magnus is waiting for Vincent.
Everyone's waiting for everyone else.
Yeah, well, it's hard to not to trust Vincent, right? He won matches against everyone. Again, well, not Hikaru, but Fabiano, and then
Mhm.
Magnus in the final. So maybe Fabiano will be now regretting playing e4 too quickly. Oh, sorry, MVL.
Mhm.
Yeah, MVL is the one who plays white. So
But I'm wondering what the players are considering. Obviously, e5, the symmetry strategy seems to be reasonable in most cases. We've seen some patterns emerge, or at least some things that I've taken note of, is that often when you start with these knights in the corner or any piece in the corner, you don't want to have it linger there too long, since like it kind of just languish there as the game goes on. I think we saw several games where that piece, like, if you don't move it early, somehow like it just stays there until move 20, which would be quite a detriment to the position. So I'm sure both players would love to get their knights out relatively early
yeah.
on. Other than e5, I'm thinking, how can it be possible to, if you want to play a more asymmetrical game? One idea I was thinking about, I don't know how much I like it, but we do have, is that f5 on the board we have from Hikaru? Yes, we do. I was wondering about f5, but I wasn't sure if you want to have this rook out so early, but you also open up the queen, so that looks quite interesting. So dynamic move, right? f5 versus potentially e5.
Yeah. Yeah, one downside, of course, is that the knight can jump on g3 and attack the rook immediately.
Right.
But
After takes, knight g3, yeah?
yeah, with the white queen still being blocked, maybe it's not such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
So-
mean, maybe white can play f4 if you want to open up the queen.
yeah, but then
But
we can play knight g6, attack that pawn,
yeah,
and you cannot
f5.
play g3 to protect it. f5.
Yeah, the knight
Well,
jumps
then
c5.
we
So
get
the
a
knight is
nice.
getting much happier in the center, yeah?
Mhm. And maybe that pawn could potentially become a weakness because it's harder to defend it so advanced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this f5 move, of course, you're attacking the pawn in e4, but it also has the benefit. I was suggesting, hey, maybe white can start with f4. So the move f5 for black is similar in the sense that these three pieces immediately get some open files and diagonals. So it looks like you might lose some time with your rook, but you might gain a lot of activity with your other pieces.
Yeah. By the way, Magnus did make a first move, and he seems to have copied Vincent's decision to play d4.
Yeah, so
Of
we
course, we
have a
don't know
couple
whether
other
he
games
did.
with d4. So 2 games of e4 and 2
Yeah,
games of d4.
yeah, and Fabiano is still in the thinking tank. Maybe he will copy Hikaru's decision, maybe not. We will see.
You might wait a little bit before making that decision, right? He might think like,
Yeah,
oh,
otherwise
f5,
it's too
interesting.
obvious, right?
Let me see the next 5 moves, right? Like, let's see how that turns out. And Hikaru's not at the board right now, so perhaps he's having. Well, I doubt he's having much of a look at the other games since they're only one move in. So perhaps a little bit of refreshments are in order for him.
Coffee.
Coffee, yeah. They're playing in Paris, so right now they have 6 hours ahead of where I am at on the East Coast. So they're
Yeah.
what is it,
1
like
p.m.
1 p.m. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm sure they've already had a little bit, but never hurts to have a bit more during the game.
Oh, I can drink coffee at 1 a.m. No problem.
I mean, I know you are streaming, so perhaps sometimes you need it as well, right?
Oh yeah, during the streams it can be 20 cups. No issue whatsoever. Are you a tea person or a coffee person?
Both. I've definitely become more of a coffee person as I guess I'm getting older, not older, but like more working and stuff like that. Because I remember when I was in high school, everyone used to drink coffee, and I was like, what are these guys doing? It tastes so bad. These guys are just pretending. But then later on, I understood that it is quite an essential ingredient to have some caffeine. But actually, I would prefer tea. I love to drink tea. Coffee is
Hmm?
more just like I need the energy. Tea is like I can have it any time of day. Always a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Nice.
Looking, yeah, going
So
around the moves. This is the most advanced game so far, by the way, with the two
Yeah,
moves.
yeah, it is 2 moves made. Well, 1.5.
One and a half, but it's still ahead of any other game.
Yeah, indeed. While we're still waiting for more moves, for those of you who just joining us, the format today is slightly different from the first 2 days. The first 2 days was round robin rapid portion where only 8 players qualified for the knockout, and today we have a quarterfinal game 1. So it's a game 1 out of the 2 in each match. So we have 4 matches going on at the time. So we have 4 games total. But as soon as they're finished, the day will be finished. Tomorrow will be game 2 and potentially tie break, because if the match is tied after 2 games, 1-1, then the players will have to play tie break. So today, Hikaru is playing only 1 game, regardless of the result.
And Maria, I actually saw someone write in chat one of the recent days. They were saying that the players who finished 9 to 12, right? The players who did not make the cut. I saw someone say that they're also still playing, but I don't think that's the case, right? At least they're not playing today. But I didn't think they were playing, right? Or are they?
I don't think they are. Is there a losers bracket? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't. I
know
mean,
that-
mhm.
I know that those who lose in the quarterfinal, they will play a losers bracket at the same time in the next days. But I think the players who are eliminated might be playing in some side events, maybe commentating, maybe there are a bunch of very big content creators there, like Anagram, Hypothesis, there's Nemo. So I think those players will have plenty of opportunities to play chess.
And speaking of chess, look at this move from Hikaru. He does not
Oh.
recapture the pawn. Rook f5. We were talking how
Are we
perhaps
seeing
this
a
rook.
gambit?
Yeah, we're seeing a opening in the style of the Benko gambit, where black will go b5, a6, and Hikaru is offering another trade of pawns. But I believe his idea is that all his pieces are going to be flying out. He's actually spoiled for choice. Does he take with the bishop, or does he take with the knight? I suppose the knight. We were talking earlier how you do want to get these pieces out from the corner. So perhaps next would be e5, d5. Bring out the bishops, bring out the knight, and you have all this compensation. So very interesting decision here. And if Arjun doesn't take back on g6, Hikaru just takes back with the pawn.
Yeah, and he will have a massive center.
Very nice. By the way, this idea completely engine approved, saying that, hey, like this is about as good as just regaining the pawn. So it's a completely sound gambit on the second move of the game. And one more thing is that you're also opening up these files for the queen and rook immediately to put pressure on the pawns on the GNF files.
Yeah, I like this decision from Hikaru. And while Arjun is thinking, I wanted to check the other games. I see that Fabiano is still has not moved. He is waiting for more events to happen on Hikaru's board.
Well, if he
And
likes this gambit, I think he will get it on the board, because if he likes this idea Hikaru played, he'll go f5. Now, there's not much choice for white, right? Like, you're not going to push the pawn. This pawn can become very overstretched.
yeah,
So he might be like, hey, that's a nice
easy
idea.
to attack as well.
Yeah, easy to attack. If he really likes this, he could just, there's no real way for white to maybe truly avoid it, right? After f5, it's like, of course you're going to take. And then comes g6. So we'll see if he decides to go that route. That would be pretty
You
amusing.
cannot really tell then to any. Oh, he just played a 5. You cannot really say now that you did not copy it from Hikaru.
Yeah,
Unless
he fought for
takes
12
back with
minutes.
the rook.
Yeah, that's true. He could take back with the rook, exactly. But I think he was impressed by the idea. I think he thought, wow, that looks fun. Let's but we'll find out. Maybe Maxime will find a way to deviate as well.
Maybe he just took on a 5, so this is the moment of truth. What Fabiano will do. Meanwhile, next we can check Nepo's position because it's completely different. It's very symmetrical at the moment, reminds of maybe a bit of Petrov.
Yes. Also, Arjun recaptures on g6. Hikaru immediately recaptures with the knight. Taking with the bishop, by the way, although natural, actually apparently ran into some very nasty moves like f4.
Oh,
And
wow.
probably there's ideas of like g4 and f5. And your bishop might get shut out of the game. So knight g6 is the better move positionally, but it's also tactically even stronger. And next up, for example, like we said, e5, d5. Maybe not. Yeah, d5. For a second, I thought these pieces switched places. I was like, wait a minute, no, I got to be careful. Don't want to get attacked. But no, e5 and d5 look like they will be two
Yeah,
potential ideas.
I also like the idea of keeping the bishop on e8 for now, and after moving the pawn d, we have those attacks on the rook exactly. Or even
Yeah.
bishop a4 and put more pressure on c2 square, because to castle to the left side for white or for black will be very difficult. So they cannot really easily push pawns in front of the king at the moment. That would be weakening the position too much.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the bishops in the center, right? Like you don't need to immediately develop them because they're so flexible, right? You could put,
Yeah.
there could be even some idea to go this way, right? And all of a sudden you're getting some good pressure on this diagonal, or maybe you decide to go this way. So there's a lot of potential for all these pieces here.
Yeah, those bishops are literally the pillars of this position.
Mm-hmm. The king and queen of the position. Let's have a quick look at this Nepo game. By the way, Nepo just played. It was quite symmetrical, but then he played a pretty nice move that with this f5. This reminds me of the first game of the day yesterday, where we saw Hikaru and Fabi make a pretty quick draw. It started very symmetrical and it stayed very symmetrical. But here, f3, logical move. Hey, maybe we get some e4. Maybe we'll prepare it. Maybe we'll bring out the bishop. And Jan says, okay, no more symmetry. f5. f5. I'm going to stop you. I'm going to grab space. Yes, I made a weakness. I made an outpost on e5 for you, but I'm going to challenge it. My knight's coming to g6. My knight can come to f7. My bishop can come to f6.
Yeah, that knight on g6 especially is very handy. It's usually not easy to challenge the knight on a5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is the downside, right? When you're pushing your pawns in one color, you're weakening the opposite color. So the dark squares are a little bit weaker. But the knight on g6 compensates perfectly. So
Yeah,
nice move for sure.
the only other problem usually that can arise is the pawn on d5, but white cannot really challenge that pawn very easily. I was worried about e6 potentially shutting down the queen on g8, but I don't think here black even will have to play e6. They can play c6, develop the bishop through a5, and keep the queen somewhat active. In case of e4, the queen will have all the diagonal to itself.
Absolutely. So yeah, we have some totally different games. By the way, Magnus's game against Norderbeck, that was the other d4 game, has a little bit of similarity. So we have d4, f5, immediately f5, right? So Nepomniachtchi played d5, and now we get f3.
Kind of a Lapin.
Yeah,
but
yeah. It's
the other
Sicilian.
way.
Yeah. But now, Maria, we have f5 on every board, regardless of the first move for white. And check this out. Fabi, I was telling you, I'm sure he was impressed with what Hikaru did.
Yeah.
Because he's doing the same thing after
Copycat.
Copycat. But, you know, I don't blame him, because I would be, let's jump back to Hikaru's game, by the way. Let's flip it over.
Fabiana, Fabiana.
Capiano, yeah. Capiano, yeah.
Capiano.
But no, I mean, when we saw this f5, we're like, whoa, that's interesting. Like he's gonna bring out the rook, but then he plays g6. You're like, oh, that's a real nice idea.
Now I understand.
Yeah, so we can figure out how Capiano arrived at his decision.
Yeah. So I wonder at what point it might deviate. So it will be up to Maxime maybe or Arjun to play something a bit more risky, so that the other player doesn't go for it.
Well,
Who do you
now
think is more risky player in a classical format? MBL or Arjun?
I think it's Arjun, right? Because he he was on that huge streak. I mean, he's currently still rated, what is he, fifth in the world or fourth in the
Mhm.
world actually. And
Mhm.
his meteoric rise to 2,800, part of it was he was scoring at a really, really high rate between crushing a lot of open events, and also he was winning the round robin events he was playing in. Those
Mhm.
were elite round robins, but not the super, super elite ones, let's say, with all the top 10 players. He was playing some with, let's say, top 30 players. But anyway, the point is that to get his rating, he had to win at a very high percentage,
Yeah.
that take a little bit of risk, play some aggressive openings with both sides. So in the recent, of course, Maxime, he's very famous for his Nidor, for his Grunfeld, those very, very aggressive and dynamic openings. But recently, I feel like Arjun, both sides, both colors, maybe a bit more aggressive, and he's got the power of youth on his side as well.
So yeah, more creativity, more resourcefulness to take your opponent out of their prep. That's what Arjun is famous for, and of course also insane tactical vision and the feel to the position, like in which direction to convert it. But of course, freestyle is freestyle, called freestyle for a reason. Here, your opponent also can come up with something you completely did not expect. And like players like Noderbeck, for example, he crushed it in the first event in rapid portion. He was crushing it here in the first day, but then in Weissenhaus, he completely crumbled in the classical portion. He barely won any games because he just could not get a playable position out of the opening. So yeah, but Arjun, it's worth mentioning, I think he won 3 out of 4 freestyle Fridays that he played. At some point, he was the only player to ever have won it. But then I think Hikaru won
I think he won the
one.
last two, right, or something like that.
Yeah,
He's also
yeah,
on a
yeah. I
limited
didn't see the last
winning
one, but
streak.
the first 3, Arjun was winning. Maybe he didn't start like 5 out of 5, but he was finishing on top, meaning he was beating all of the leaders.
Yeah, and I was also going to mention we do have a move from Arjun G3. I was going to mention yesterday we did have a game. Hikaru was black against Arjun, and Hikaru won that game. But that was one of the craziest games, right? Both sides had moments where they were winning. Very
Mm-hmm.
dynamic position, very complicated game. So yeah, very interesting. We've seen very interesting fights between these two monsters, and again we're getting a dynamic game from move 2. By the way, this move G3, it makes the knight on H1 very unhappy, but
Mm-hmm.
he wants to play F4. He builds this chain, he uses the extra pawn. He also prevents pressure on the F file, prevents maybe any knight jumps. So my question would be, well, why not just E5, right? E5, that was my plan anyway,
Mm-hmm.
fighting for the center. So the engine says that you can still go F4, just offering the pawn, since we're going to have this pin on the G file. So let's say pawn takes. You can't win the pawn back, right? If you take it right
Yeah,
away.
you cannot.
Actually, you could do this. Hold on a second. You could do this. I didn't think you can, but apparently you're saved by Rook G1. You penetrate on the first rank, and you're getting your piece back, actually. Although white still has the advantage, but still pretty
Yeah,
funny.
but then white also has rook f8, right?
Yeah, there are Rook F8 ideas. And also you might have some situation where maybe not right away, but something like Rook, well, here you have Rook E1, but I was going to point
Yeah,
out
but first
if you
defend the
move the
bishop. And
bishop,
then, yeah.
there could be, oh wait, for some reason in my head, I
Oh,
keep thinking the king is on C8. So I was going to say, oh, you're going to get checkmated.
it's
But
not
the
a
king and
checkmate.
knight are, yeah, they're not here. But yeah, despite this whole funny variation, I doubt that you want to allow this if you're playing
Mhm.
black. But after takes, there's no rush to regain the pawn. The pawn is isolated. The pawn is a target.
Yeah.
So perhaps a different move could, some kind of developing move could be tried. But this is the idea behind G3. And it actually was the best move. So Arjun was able to find
Yeah, and
his way
even if he
forward.
doesn't necessarily play a4, it also restricts the black knight. So even though Arjun's knight is still on h1 and has no moves, at least black is in, like the knight also has no moves. Like if you go to e5, you immediately get a 4. or maybe
Mhm.
even d4.
Now we'll have a chance to see if Maxime likes
He's
that
still
move,
thinking.
but he hasn't taken on g6. Yeah,
No.
he's still a couple moves behind. I think Hikaru is still I'm trying to think of what else he can play other than e5. I mean, e5 is definitely very natural. So I'm trying to figure out if he has some other moves, but it feels very annoying if you allow this pawn chain because it does tend to block several of our pieces from
Yeah, I mean, one idea
activating.
could be h5, h4, but I guess you might just get f5 first and your knight is under attack. So you have no time to take on g3. So I think e5 will be played.
Yeah, it
We
makes a
can,
lot of sense for sure.
yeah.
But Hikaru is also
Hikaru is Hikaru.
thinking ahead. Yeah, Hikaru's Hikaru, that's true. Yeah, I mean, we've seen some funny cases where, the long range queen creates some pressure. Here, there's not really many weaknesses. I guess b2, right? This is the square that you could imagine maybe we put some pressure on in the future, but it takes quite a bit of time. Of course, white is not powerless to stop this maneuver that I just put on the board. So perhaps we
Yeah,
won't be seeing
and
that just yet.
Arjun
Mhm.
has the same idea with g3 as well. It's a multi-purpose move. He can fianchetto his queen and
Mhm.
then add the bishop on f3 after playing f4, and also organize a little attack on b7.
Mhm.
I like your multicolored arrows, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to use the different shades, but I have to master which keys give me what color. I'm kind of doing it a little bit randomly and hoping to
Yeah,
get some pretty pictures.
when I try to solve more advanced puzzles in survival, like after 50, I try to color different number of moves by different
Mhm.
colors, but it gets confusing.
Yeah, I don't know. I like to do it. No particular reason. We do have F4 very quickly played by Arjun as Hikaru
Yeah,
responds
it's
with
logical.
E5. There are some wacky lines that I'm seeing from the engine. The move that was being told to us on move one is still getting
A5.
suggested A5.
I like
It says,
A5, honestly.
but check
It's
this
very
out.
hard to stop
It
it.
does allow F5 though, right? So I would be thinking, whoa, why am I allowing these pawns down the board? Well, it turns out after 97, attacking F5,
You have to
G4.
play G4.
Now the computer says A4. So you're trying to soften up the defense of this king. Also, you're opening up some rook lifts, A3, knight C6, and you're down this pawn, but perhaps you can bring out the bishop and bring out the knight and push D5 and very, very complicated dynamic situation. My first instinct would definitely be a little bit afraid of allowing this extra pawn to go so deep into my position, but that is one of the plans you're not forced to take. Apparently, you can kind of bait white into pushing forward, perhaps that will take the tension off the center, allowing these pawns to move forward later in
Yeah,
the middle
and
game.
you can shift all of the attack on the king side. I guess it is king side. While the pawns cannot really advance because all of the pieces are controlling both f6 and g5. And black also can push h5 and disturb that pawn chain in the middle. Yeah, I like that.
The A5 move, yeah, we'll see if Hikaru will consider it. Otherwise, yeah, because the other point is that let's say you're not really too worried about them making the capture at E5, since this
No.
way the knight jumps into the center and it's getting closer, right? It's getting closer to actually making some of these threats a
Yeah.
reality. I'll also do my favorite activity showing some completely unlikely continuations, like this one,
Checkmate.
where I've checkmated the king.
Smothered mate.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always on the lookout for these random smother mate situations at the start of the game. But actually, okay, of course, bishop f2 is a nonsense move, but already this position is this completely impossible position for these players is already losing for white because all of a sudden the knight is actually very dangerous. Let's say you go back or whatever. This is actually a reality to start trying to get a checkmate on this square. So even though it was far-fetched, this whole idea we talked about earlier, it's still lurking in some positions.
Yeah, and that's why Hikaru sacrificed that pawn early. His knight is currently the only developed piece, and if Arjun indeed takes on e5, it will be already centralized, which gives a lot of compensation for a pawn.
But Hikaru has to make a big choice, right? Does he capture an f4? In this case, you leave Arjun with two isolated pawns on h2 and f4. Specifically, the f pawn could be a bit of a target, and you still keep the options of, getting some nice development in. I was considering, hey, does knight d6 make sense? So this way I can aim to either blockade this pawn or, looking at my favorite square here, combined with some bishop f6.
You
Or
really
does
want
Hikaru
to
just
have
leave
it,
it?
huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's looks like if I could get it done, I could make some really juicy threats.
Yeah, but I don't like the trade for a reason of allowing white to have more space for a queen and a bishop with absence of the pawn on g3. Like currently, they are still a little stuck in development, and they cannot. I think trading pawns will be in favor of white's position getting a bit more space and air.
Hikaru does
did?
take it though. He does take.
Take.
Let's see if he'll have a quick follow-up or if he just decided that's the best course. By the way, I want to also mention that we do have a move in Maxime's game against Fabiano, and we were
Some
keeping an eye on
crazy
that.
stuff.
Yeah, well, obviously the players must have been looking at Hikaru's board. And interestingly enough, Maxime said, I'm not going to accept the pawn. I'm going to just play f4. So he was, obviously the players were,
He
they
did not
had a
like
little
what
bit of extra information. Yeah, so maybe they thought, maybe they didn't even think it was that bad, but they were like, that looks too crazy. I want to have a more, it's game one. Let's be chill. He goes f4. Fabi now takes with the pawn. So he didn't have to bring his rook up the board. And now we get a4 and obviously a5. So it's kind of funny. The rooks are trying to activate themselves. So here we have
almost symmetrical.
almost symmetrical, but you could argue that the slight asymmetry of the pawns.
Yeah, but in whose
isn't
favor do you think
isn't
this
I
asymmetry
would think
is?
it's in black's favor just because you have this immediate file open, but more importantly, I guess I would prefer to have more pawns in the center since you
Yeah.
could realistically push them easier, but we'll see. But it's interesting that the players, having seen what's happening in Hikaru's board, or MVL having seen that, decided that I'm not going to take the pawn. Let's jump back to Hikaru, though.
But yeah, I guess Fabiano got some progress here.
Yeah, he got some development and central control for free right here. Hikaru had to pay the price of a pawn.
Yeah.
And by the way, he could also get inspired by their game because we've been mentioning this move a5 over and over. That's actually the best move.
5 a4, and he can immediately push the rook out.
Yeah, he can maybe swing it over and go for the weak pawn on f4. So that's a pretty cool idea.
And look how interestingly the dynamics work in freestyle chess. If you put the rook back and you look at the position, you see an uncastled king with a lot of problems in castling, right? Like you think you need to take out the knight, you need to take out the bishop. How do I bring that rook? Once you put the rook on a6, it looks like you not only castled, but you also developed both rooks already with just one move. And it's impossible to achieve in normal chess.
I think that's a good observation, right? Where sometimes you don't need to castle at all, right? You're actually, in this case, you could argue the castling will make my king more unsafe, right? If I have to, well, of course, if I castle this side, that looks out of the question. But even if I castle queen side, that would involve my king stepping away. There's some queen a7s. So there's zero reason for both sides to consider castling once the king already starts.
Yeah, the king is in a perfect position. You usually want it there after.
Even after you castle long, right? You still usually
after castling long, you want to play king b8 anyway. So here it's already on a perfect position. So freestyle chess really promotes versatility, creativity, and maybe more out of the box thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
It even improves classical chess as well.
yeah, show some new patterns, right? Create
Mhm.
some new ideas. Yeah, of course, the point of castling is that the king does not usually want to be in the center. The center is
Yeah.
too hot. You know, there's all this action. The king needs to get out of the way to avoid any attacks. It's safer in the corners of the board. And you also activate the rook. So when the king starts in the corner, as long as you're able to activate the rook, for example, a5 and rook a6, you could forgo the act of castling. By the way, do you remember there was a no castling chess? Do you remember that one?
Was it Kramnik's idea?
Yeah, he played some matches with this no castling chess. Just a way to play chess, but also have it be a little different. I remember there was some no castling tournament. I remember him playing Fabiano in no castling chess, but I don't remember if it was just part of a tournament or part of a match. But that just kind of
Yeah,
brain
let's
blasted
put
me
it
into
this
the
way.
past.
Kramnik got famous for other things.
Yeah, his no castling chess has been
But
forgotten.
did not take off. It's very hard to beat Fisher random.
But speaking of, right, like we still surprisingly haven't heard anything from Kramnik or his student, right? Hans, there was a lot of we did
Yeah, they
discuss this
kind of
earlier.
went off the
Mhm.
radar completely.
Yeah, of course. Several players, including a couple players, including Hans and Alireza, were slated to participate, but as we heard from the organizer, Jan Henrik Butner, there was a contract dispute, I guess, with Alireza that wasn't resolved. And with Hans, he said, I have a personal situation. We don't know what it is. And obviously, with a guy like Hans, you know, who's been very active on X and social media and was looking forward to playing the tournament, at some point you would expect we'll hear something, but so far not yet. Radio silence.
Yeah, I would love to hear something about the situation, some explanation, but feels like whatever you say at this point, it's just not gonna work in your favor, right?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, when someone says have a personal situation, you know, my first thought is like there could be some family or medical emergency, right? So it's not impossible that something like that has occurred. But I
Your
also think it's interesting that you don't hear it like Kramnik is always posting about something, right? So
yeah.
what like something happens to both of these guys? You know, then that's when people start making some theories and rumors, speculations. But it does,
Well,
of course, add.
he was raising money for a lawsuit.
Mhm.
If indeed something is going on, he might be advised by the lawyers to not to talk, but you never know.
He doesn't seem like
It
he would heed
also,
that
I don't
advice.
think he will ever listen to lawyers and not talk.
Yeah, we'll see what comes out of that saga. But that is what we know so far. We do have still
I'm also curious, I agree.
yeah, just something. But we have 8 players here, right? We did have players who are here. They're playing. Hikaru is deep in thought after his earlier gambit. We did say the top move right now is A5, which is a move
Mhm.
not unfamiliar to us. It is seen on the board between MVL and Fabi. So I think I
Yeah,
said someone in the chat like, hey, Fabi went for A5. Hikaru could go for it too. So it's like returning the favor, right? Fabi saw
yeah,
Hikaru play the gambit, he copied it, and then Hikaru would be like, hey, that A5 move. Let me borrow that as well. And the
yeah. The
idea is that
dynamics
you
of
get the rook
this,
out.
yeah, the dynamics of this position might work on different boards, even if the moves were not exactly the same, because the pieces are still placed in the same squares at the start. So yeah, moving the rook out. Oh wow, he is playing Queen H8. And yeah, just to reiterate the question about why he did not take the pawn, it's much more complicated than just that he has Rook G1 at the end. Because White also has attacks on the back rank, and it just simplifies the position in White's favor. Yeah, because like he has chance to attack the Rook over and over and develop all of the pieces. So even though Black takes back the pawn, but that was not the point to take back. He is not trying to take back the pawn he's trying to get an advantage in development, and here he loses it on white's terms. So here
Yeah.
actually also will infiltrate on F8, and he cannot really stop it.
Yeah, and also if you take this pawn in H2, yeah, rook F8 is just devastating. But I also saw there's some funny ideas where there's like rook B4, suddenly like there's attacks
Yeah.
on the black king here. So yeah, Hikaru could actually regain this pawn because he loses a piece, but then he'll have a double attack. But as you completely correctly said, you're going to lose all your development and you're giving
Yeah.
it back to white. White's getting all these tempi. So by playing queen h8, Hikaru has two ideas. First of all, now he can really start considering taking the pawn since he stepped out of queen g8. But the other idea is that he's taking aim at Arjun's king or his queen side or king side or whatever. But the queen is preparing to put pressure. Of course, you could play bishop f6. There's still these ideas of a5. Maybe you can lift the rook. Maybe the knight can jump in. So if you give me enough moves, I'll start to make some real fun attacking ideas happen.
Yeah, of course, white gets a chance to play F5, but I
That
don't
can
know.
help me,
It's
right?
hard
Maybe
to
it can help
imagine that
me.
it will happen, right? It's a very computer move.
Yeah, maybe here
Yeah.
we'll get this smothered mate situation.
It does seem risky for white to allow the knight on E5. One more move that improves the development of black. Plus the pawn is overstretched and isolated, easier to attack. Maybe it does restrict a little bit. I don't know, the light squared bishop cannot go to G6, but that's about it. The knight will jump in, start attacking it. And even A5, rook A6 comes with a new rook joining the attack.
And Maria, I want to show another mate for fun. Let's say white goes rook
Right.
f3. Of course,
Like
this
mates.
is hanging, but we don't want it. We're going to go here. We're going to threaded mate. And now, of course, you can play rook
Oh,
b3.
I know what you're doing there.
This is a
Oh,
real smothered mate.
this is
A
very
real
cute.
smothered mate with the queen. Yeah,
This can
so
totally happen in Blitz games, like in Freestyle Fridays.
some mate like this. Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, there was a fun checkmate. Was it Christopher Yu who got checkmated in Freestyle Friday a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
There was it was something with the knight early on, like knight jumped in and mated or no?
It was the queen at the end checkmating on b5, and the king is on b8. And I think it's like a rook and then maybe two rooks on the two sides. So it's basically was like a Paulette checkmate. But
So it was like
very
the queen and just like the king can't
Yeah.
move anywhere because it's
No,
blocked by
it was
the
like
pieces, or
the queen coming, like the king is on b8, the black king, and the white queen comes up to b5, and
oh,
there is no
b5, yeah.
b7, something like that.
I see. Yeah, I didn't see that one, but if anyone in chat did, you got maybe, I don't know if links are allowed.
It was
but-
like 14 moves, literally just checkmated.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's quite like it's not that rare, especially when you have the Freestyle Fridays, you have hundreds of players, you're playing a 3-minute time control. I think it could happen, right, that we get these funny mates on the board. Also, I saw someone was asking, how are you allowed to see the other games, right? It's not fair. You can copy these other players. Well, that's normal. That's normal. You play if you've ever played a chess tournament before, you all sit, in one playing hall. You praise people on your left, people on your right. Sometimes it happens that you're playing similar positions, or even if it's not similar, sometimes even just seeing a move on someone's board could give you some inspiration. It's not cheating. It's not unethical to look at other boards. People do it all the time, and usually they don't look
Yeah.
at other boards for moves. They just look because they're, oh, how's this guy doing? Oh, that's an interesting position. So this is totally normal.
Yeah, in fact, I think someone asked the organizers, and they commented that they want the players to see each other's openings, and they want to see these dynamics, how the players take decisions based on what is happening on the other board. So if they wanted to, they could have restricted them, because the whole playing hall is designed by organizers. They can put it however they want. they want to, if they can tell players they cannot move for the first, I don't know, they cannot move off the board for the first 5 moves. I don't know, like I think they even have screens everywhere, so you can actually follow the other games without leaving the board.
Yeah.
It's
Well-
their rules, it's their tournament. So
I don't know if that's we did say there was some contract negotiations and disputes. If there was a rule that I can't get up first X amount of time for my board, I don't know if I'd like that one. I'd be like, what if I need to use the restroom or get some coffee or water? So but I of course I understand completely what you're. You can always create something, right?
they could
To
stagger
prevent
the
that,
games
yeah.
as well. Like there are ways to avoid this from happening, but or
It's
just
not
have
something to be avoided.
different openings.
Yeah.
I mean, different starting positions would completely eliminate this problem, but they
Oh
also
yeah.
this
You could have a
collaboration.
freestyle game on every board. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's more interesting, I think, to have the same, and it doesn't even really matter. We're seeing all the games by like move were completely different. So
yeah,
92
yeah. I
from
mean,
Arjun, by the way.
maybe I think in last event there was maybe once that Hikaru and Fabi were playing the same moves and their opponents were playing the same moves for like 12 moves. But in the end, still
In
it
the
will
freestyle
eliminate.
event.
Yeah, in the Weissen Farms. But that was also, it kind of felt a bit more forced. Once you opened up the position with one way, you get all the trades and the same attacks on the same pieces. Like I think it was a bit more forced, so it did copy for a bit longer. But I think I agree, like we can see different dynamics, how the players, if they do actually follow the other players' moves because they trust that player to know better or not. It's interesting.
It's of course a lot way more common in class and standard chess because you might just have the same opening, right? You might copy the same line, or not even copy. You're just like, oh, we're playing the same variation. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, people play the same openings. There is nothing wrong about it.
yeah, there's a finite amount of openings, right? Especially when you get to the top level, there's
Yeah.
certain openings that you know,
They just keep playing the same lines. Yeah.
whether it's Berlin or Petrov or something else, right? There are openings that are the top level lines that all the top players are using. But for now, I'm looking at some idea. By the way, every move, A5, A5, A5. That's what
Yeah.
the
It's just
computer wants to
spamming
do.
A5.
Yeah, which is extremely logical considering that your rook in the on A8 needs to get into the game somehow, and this is a great way to do it. I think Arjun's idea with 92, first of all, he defends F4, which that's understandable. But also the knight might make its way forward to protect the king in case there's some danger on this diagonal.
Yeah. I think it might happen now. Just by
A5?
process of elimination,
Mhm.
I only like maybe bishop f6, but it's a bit, it releases the pressure on f4 pawn, and I like to keep it there.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Still a good move, right? Why not activate the bishop?
yeah. But bringing the rook to a safe active square early turns out quite beneficial very often in freestyle chess. And rook on b6, even on c6 at the moment because of the knight being on e2, will look quite good. Or just keep pushing like stockfish.
Yeah, funnily enough, after A5, white should play A4. If you ignore that pawn, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going. If you keep ignoring me, I'm going to make a random move. This is going to be a pretty nasty idea. So white is advised to stop it early on. But it's not the only move. I mean, bishop F6 makes sense. I also like this 96 idea. This seems like a pretty flexible development of
Yeah.
the knight. but it feels like you still need this move, even if you don't do it now, within the next 5 moves maximum. You need it because the rook and a8 gets in the
Yeah.
game this way. So I will make it's hardly a prediction, but I think we will definitely see a5 in this game from Hikaru.
Yeah, at some point. And I also like the fact that his knight is still on c8, which means after a5, a4, he can play knight b6 to put the pressure on the pawn on a4.
That's a good point as well, right? Perhaps not knight d6, perhaps we can also use the b6 square. Shall we maybe have a little bit of a look around while Hikaru ponders his options?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's maybe go a little bit game by game since we haven't checked in with some of these guys since the first moves. By the way, one thing that catches my attention about this position between Vincent and Jan is not even the position, but the time. You know, Nepo, he's famous for his speed. You know, he plays, of course, he's a great Blitz and Rapid player, but he plays his classical games like Blitz and Rapid. He plays his freestyle games like Blitz and Rapid. He's got 124 on the clock. Look at that. Very, very speedy. I think we left off right here, right? We were saying F5, what a move. So what they do? H4. So we were talking about A4, A5. What about H4, H5?
Yeah, he barely spent, I think on move 1, he spent the most of the time, and the least was moves well, h6 was kind of logical, and g5.
A4, A5. It's on the board, yeah.
Yeah, in fairness, his decisions were fairly easy here. A4, you kind of have to play a5. H4, you want to play g5. So
Still,
yeah, maybe it was a bit easier.
Vincent time, not a problem yet, but keeps it up. There will be some big time. I like Nepo's position, by the way, right? Just visually looking, he's taking a lot of space with his pawns. He's also creating a little bit of a target. Like, I think Vincent at some point might look to get the bishop on the diagonal here, but Nepo's got a lot of activity coming up as well. Maybe at some point he'll get very aggressive. Maybe b5, right? The king is on b1, the king is on b8. I wonder if he can try to go after it at some point. That could be very dynamic if
Yeah,
he's able to make it work.
yeah, I like his position as well. It's he has more space and yeah, a little more active. If
And a
he can
lot more
keep
time.
with it, definitely he solved all the issues of the black from the start.
Let's see how
Maybe we can have
Magnus
a
is.
look. Yeah, was the
Ooh.
slowest starting, but there is a progress and some interesting progress there.
Yeah, g5 from Nordebek. So he is I mean, it makes sense, right? You have, again, we mentioned this, you have these pieces in the corner, you got to give them some breathing room.
Yeah, and he spent like almost 12 minutes for this move.
Magnus follows very consistently, right? He played f3 to play e4. So he keeps it going. And Norderbeck is using the knights. And what a move. He's actually, so Magnus did not, he spent a little bit of time, he plays b3. So he did not want to play pawn to e5. He did not want to chase the knight around. Perhaps he was worried the knight's coming to c4. So he didn't like something here. I'm seeing this one engine line. It's kind of funny. It's b3, knight b6, and the knight is just jumping around all over the place. But apparently it's all good. It's all fine. Perhaps, you know, maybe I can launch my pawn. Maybe I can drop with the knight here. Kind of reminds me of the Aliakin opening, right? e4, knight f6, and the knight starts hopping around the board.
Well, here in Alekhin's, I think you do play c4, but in this particular case, c4 seems to be very risky for white.
Yeah, with the king on b1.
And if you cannot play c4, then the knight is completely fine on d5.
True, then it would be basically an outpost. So Magnus does not want to overstretch his pawns, but Nordebek, he's hitting back hard. e5. So what are you going to do? So, well, Magnus goes d5. Apparently this move gives black the advantage. Why is that? Let's see. So you could take, or no, knight f4 first, or taking. Apparently this position is, Arjun's really liking it for black, saying, hey, we got h5 coming, we got a5 coming too, coming on both sides. We have these flank pawns on both sides of the board, and perhaps this structure of the dark squares. Let's make it some, I don't know. I'm trying to, oh, green, that's cool. This structure of the dark squares is very, very sturdy, and not be chased away by white pawns or pieces.
Yeah. I like that for Netherback a lot. And actually the pawn on b3 is also restricting its own knight from developing. So currently you cannot, like, you have to play knight e2, because on d3 it will be captured and there will be a doubled pawn. So
Yeah, this has not happened yet, but apparently if it does. Also, by the way, look at this, Maria. I can also start maybe targeting this pawn, right? On e4, it could become a little bit of a liability, especially if I can chase your knight away from g3 with my h7 pawn.
yeah. Yeah, he has a lot of potential in the position, and Magnus has some weaknesses, some problems to deal with, like e4.
I think, to be honest, this is it's only been 6 moves, but so far I feel like the handling of black's position has been very impressive by Norderbeck. I mean, f5, g5, knight d6, very provocative, right? Magnus doesn't want to get provoked. He goes b3, probably looking to stop some invasions here. Now we get e5, right? So feels like from the very first moves, Norderbeck came looking for a fighting game, and he's getting it.
Yeah, he did lose. I think he lost both games to Magnus in the match in the first event. So he clearly does not want to repeat that mistake.
The mistake of losing.
Yes.
Yeah. So he will
It's
be
a big
looking
mistake.
to,
Of course,
yeah,
you don't want that to happen.
yeah. If he didn't lose, he would have done much better. I agree. So we'll see if he can
Just don't lose.
learn from his mistakes. Let's maybe check out MVL Fabi as well. They are also deep in the fight after e4 f5. Yeah, let's flip it around because I'm used to looking at black since we were looking at Hikaru's game. Yeah, we saw that the Gambit got declined. The Hikaru Gambit was declined. Then we had the A-pawns make their move. Bishop f3. So that's kind of reminds me of the idea we were looking at for Hikaru, except this time white's doing it. Knight g6,
G3
g3.
and get off the queen.
Yeah, is it coming? No, we have d3 first. And by the way, you asked me earlier, who do I like this trade for? Of the G and E pawns, and I was thinking I like it for black, and this is why, because something like e5 here might give me a good control of the center, although things are, of course, still far from clear.
Yeah, and that bishop on f3 also can get attacked by the pawn with the tempo.
If I could make that happen, yeah, I would love to push those pawns, and suddenly I'm crushing down the center. And back to Hikaru's game, I don't think we've had a move, but let's double check.
Yeah, he's still thinking.
He's thinking, and we were saying, oh no, sorry, he
Oh
is
wait,
not
no,
thinking.
he just played d5.
He just
He
played
just played
d5. Okay, so yeah, we were thinking, will we go for the pawn? Will we try to bring the knight out? Will we try
Or
to
a5.
a5, which is the Edge's favorite move in every position here? Hikaru goes pawn to d5. And I suppose that he still keeps all these ideas in mind, except he's not committing to one of them just yet. And he first wants to maybe open up, or take control of some center. Maybe there was an idea that you mentioned earlier where the bishop could come out on this diagonal, right? Maybe that's something in the air for Hikaru.
Yeah, there is another thing here. After a5, logical move is a4, right? But now our bishop is controlling a4, so knight b6 comes with a tempo. So d5 move might be preparing a5.
I see. So that way, with the pawn at a4, might be a little bit of a
Yeah,
target.
and logical move knight c3 actually runs into d4 because the queen sneakily defends it now.
Yep,
So I actually like this move a lot. I think
it
Hikaru
makes
is
sense.
a longer game.
It certainly makes sense. Yeah. Well, we will take a short break as Arjun goes for his think. And when we'll be back, we'll see how Hikaru he's sacrificed the pawn. He's looking for activity. We'll see how he drums that up. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back with all the coverage of the games.
Yep.
And welcome back, everyone. We are here for the day 3 of the Paris Freestyle event. Hikaru against Arjun Erigaisi, and we have a couple moves to catch up. So let's see what we missed, Maria. I feel like we had a lot of action, right? While we were on a short break. Let's see what happened here after Hikaru played d5. Arjun played f5. Look at that.
Yep.
He's attacking the knight. We thought this was a move earlier when we analyzed this. We thought this could be something Hikaru could be happy with since his knight jumps into the center. Now, of course, there are ideas of attacking the white king. So Arjun plays d3. He says you cannot go to c4. And now Hikaru goes knight d6, which for some reason gets a question mark, but it looks like a very logical move. I developed the knight, and I'm also attacking the pawn.
But yeah, notice that d5 also got a question mark, and I don't know. I also liked it, but I guess we're gonna find out, or we will never know. Or maybe in Hikaru's recap, he can shed some light on why, in hindsight, it's not such a good move. But I personally really like it. Both knights are now developed in the center. Maybe the engine somehow sees how Arjun can maintain that pawn advantage, and 30 moves later, Hikaru is still gone down, but in I don't know, in human perspective, this looks slightly better for black if you don't think about an extra pawn, but of course, this is the compensation that he's getting for it.
So it looks like if you actually want to defend your pawn, the logical move to me is knight h to g3.
Yeah.
Right? The knight comes out, you develop, you defend the pawn. So this is one idea, and it looks quite reasonable. The engine actually suggests a different move, though. Doesn't care about the pawn or doesn't mind the attacking the pawn. And he goes knight f4. This is actually a very logical move when you look at it because you're attacking the pawn on d5. But you're
You
also
offer
trying
your
to
pawn on f5, but you're planning to take d5.
Yeah, if you go rook f5, now I go knight g3, hitting the rook. It is possible that I grab this pawn after, but another issue is that, let's say you take with a knight, then knight e6 is a big problem. The bishop on d8 is actually completely unprotected since it's the rooks, the heavy pieces are cut off on the back rank. So that could be an interesting idea. I actually don't think we'll see that because it feels like, well, why not just go here and defend the pawn with your knight that's doing absolutely nothing? And this is also quite a reasonable move. So Hikaru is looking pretty active, but the price he paid is the F pawn, right? He sacrificed that pawn earlier in the game. So
But
we'll see.
the interesting point here is that engine says after knight f4, black does not take on f5, but also it ignores the hanging pawn on d5. And the best move is which one, chat? Again, the same as the last six moves, 7 moves, a5.
A5. But Maria,
There's
sorry to
A5.
interrupt. We have an interview from Arjun that we'll get a chance to listen so we can maybe get some insight into the position. Let's bring it up.
I feel quite confident about my position. I really didn't like how he handled the position after like ef4, gf4. I was expecting some knight d6. Queen h8 was probably still fine. I went knight e2. I think he had to provoke like d4 with bishop f6, d4 and play something here, but I was already liking my position and I really didn't like his move d5. F5, knight e5, d3. According to me, I'm like significantly better because my pawn on f5 is strong, and also my queen can go to c5 whenever required, and my bishop can either go to c3 or g3, and knight can come to g3, and there's also knight f4, knight e6 or knight d4, knight e6 ideas. So I'm really liking my position, but of course there's a lot to play, and he still has some compensation for the pawn.
So maybe somewhat sharing a mind with the engine there, saying,
We're back, and that was Arjun's confession. I called it an interview, but I guess it's a little bit of self-interview, right? I actually didn't realize they had confessionals for this event. Did they have them for last one, Maria? Do you recall?
Yeah, they did. They did
Okay.
have it in some house as well, although not so many players actually were taking advantage of it. But
Mhm.
I did get some really interesting insights from Keimer, because like it was interesting how the game is just starting and he's saying how this pawn is potentially going to be a weakness. And we don't see that at all until like move 25, where this becomes like the major point of the position and everything is around that pawn. So he like looked into the future almost. And yeah, that's like generally like their thoughts on how they think about developing the pieces. To be honest, I personally was too focused on how Arjun just looks a bit scared in that corner. Maybe he's just not used to doing confessionals. But what did you think of his insights?
Yeah, I think also the lighting wasn't doing him much favors, which is not his fault, of course, but it looked like, yeah, he's really in a, middle of nowhere, trying to send the cry for help. But he seemed like he was really happy with his position. He was saying, look, we were mentioning there's this knight f4 move, but he's also bringing up knight d4, right? That makes a lot of sense too. You defend, you can invade. So he seemed, his impression seemed like he was happy with how things are going. But as he also said, there's still a lot to play for, as Hikaru is looking to create a lot of activity
doesn't
and
like the
counterplay
approach
for his pawn deficit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He's happy with the position. Yeah, he is also soft spoken. True. But yeah, he also like it must be a little unusual, maybe even awkward for him because he usually doesn't do any interviews until the tournament is over. So talking during the game for the first time like this, I don't know if he actually did confessionals in Norway chess because those were sort of mandatory, but at least once per event. It's just like imagine you play all your life in complete silence and suddenly you need to talk. It's almost like taking you out of your mood composure and focus. It might really mess up with your playing routine because they all have a routine. They did it all their life. Like you're a professional chess player as well, Alex. Like it's strange, right?
Well, I've never had the experience of doing confessionals, but yeah, like you said, you're used to playing in a nice, quiet environment. You're not talking to anyone unless you're in a dispute and you got to get the arbiter or something like that. So I imagine that it could be a new experience and a jarring experience sometimes, but I think it's a great feature, these confessionals. You brought up Norway chess, which will be coming up next month, which will be an amazing super tournament. But yeah, that is a very, I think, a cool feature of the tournament. Of course, you have players. Hikaru is using it quite a bit every
I mean,
game.
Hikaru basically
Yeah.
lives in confessional in
Yeah,
Norway chess.
yeah, that's fair to say.
He
But
just
other
takes his
players also.
coffee, goes there, and just sits there talking and like, "Hello,
Mhm.
chat." Today's video.
Yeah, and it makes our job a lot easier too because we get to hear his insights and gives us more things to analyze, talk about. But just all the, of course, not everyone goes through it that frequently, but hearing the thoughts from all the players during the game, it's nice. But also, I would say that one thing that I do a lot during my games, you're playing these games for hours and hours and hours, so it's nice to sometimes have a little bit of a break. So I'll just kind of go, maybe have a little bit of coffee, have a little bit of tea. If they have this refreshment stand, I like to put some water on my face. So the confessional can also serve as a way to just decompress for just a moment before locking back in, and heading into battle. So I think it's a good feature. I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoy that because the players also, they kind of like maybe analyze it from a different perspective when they put it in words. And maybe it also helps them process it because as a streamer, I also sometimes find it useful to explain my thought process to chat, because then I realize, oh, actually, I didn't think about this from that point of view, because I try to kind of simplify it. But then I also simplify it for myself, and I kind of start questioning it myself. And yeah, sometimes you come up with some new ideas.
Well, actually, this brings me a memory from last year's Norway Chess, where I believe I was doing I was doing commentary, and there was a moment when Hikaru was playing against Pragananda. Hikaru ended up winning that game. Then during the game, Prague went to the confessional, and there was a very sharp moment where I think Prague was sacrificing a piece, and he was like, "Oh, I just sacrificed this piece. It's very complicated." And he started giving the variations, like, "Okay, here's my idea." And as he was explaining and describing what he was going to be doing, he realized, wait, Hikaru can maybe go here. So during the confessional, he actually realized that his sacrifice was unsound. And then it was kind of interesting to see it in real time. And he's like, and then he had to go to the game. And the confessional, I guess, helped him in a way to realize this mistake he made. Although at that point it ended up
It was
being
too
too
late.
late. It was too late, and Hikaru ended up finding the move that Prague initially had missed, and ended up winning that game in great style. So, but to your point, yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes it will help you before you make the mistake, right? As you're
Yeah,
sounding
do
out
that
their
before.
plans.
Do that before players. They need to learn from that mistake of Prague and go to confessional in advance. I'm thinking about that sacrifice. Should I do it, chat? Should I do it?
And by the way, here we go. We heard from Arjun. He was saying he's thinking about the knight to d4. That's what he plays. The only thing about this knight is that it is a little bit of the crosshairs of my queen on h8, but similarly, the queen on g1, there is it's defending. I mean, yeah, I was thinking, is there rook g8? But that doesn't really accomplish much. You could just block it. Perhaps we'll see bishop f6, right? We were mentioning this move. By the way, something funny that I'm going to comment on, or funny to me, the players are notating. The players are they have score sheets. I'm looking at the camera as Arjun gets up, maybe another confessional for him. But we have the score sheets of the pens, and that is, of course, completely normal when you're playing a standard time control event, like an official tournament game, FIDE game or whatnot. I find it a little amusing they're notating in this 960. It's I also find the concept of notation nowadays kind of funny when you have the DGT boards where the moves are automatically transmitted and kept track of. It's like I guess you don't really have to notate, but the fact that it's freestyle, but I guess it's kind of for the players. It's part. You mentioned routine. That's very much part of the routine. Maybe the players feel comfortable with that as well. Like you make a move, you write it down. But anyway, I thought it was something interesting that I just
Yeah, I think
realized I'm doing.
it also is mandatory. Well, I think it's partially one of those things that we just don't want to let go of because it's been there for centuries and it's just a nice tradition to have those score sheets for the future generations as well. But I think one more reason is in case of a software failure, we need to have those score sheets written by both players so that we can see if there was a repetition, if there was a valid claim of threefold or 50 move rule. So yeah, I think this is it's good that we have it, but I mean, we can live without it. Obviously, everyone is following the game, and even if the GGT software fails, we can still go back. But then, do you get rid of it only in classical chess? Do you get rid of it in rapid games? Do you
But I don't think they
do you
notate in
draw the
rapid
line?
games, right?
Yeah.
But actually, yes, well, I guess it does make sense that they have the notation because yesterday, they had the tablets next to the games, right? And the point of those was check for the 40th move because you can't offer draw before that. Check for the three folds, check for the 50 move rule. So now you just notate, and that's the most important part of the notation. You still need to make some of these claims yourself, right? So how are you going to make them if you don't have the notation? Well, there you go. You've got it there. So yeah, part of the chess lore, chess rules, and makes sense. Hikaru is in thought. The pawn on f5 now is securely protected, and I can also play knight to g3. So you don't really have much of a chance of winning that pawn back in the near future, but Hikaru needs to look for activity. I still like this bishop f6 move. We were bringing it up on several occasions. And that looks like an extremely natural idea since you're going to be, first of all, actually, Arjun is threatening a fork. So that needs to be addressed, whether you play rook g8 first or not. And after bishop f6, you're also creating some discovered attacks. Like, for example, if I play knight to g3, now after knight d3, if you take my knight back, you're really getting into trouble. So knight e6 first could be an idea, but now the pawn on b2 is in my sights. I'll go rook g8, knight g3, and I would love to make some kind of sacrifice, but it's not really enough here. You know, I was looking at, can I go knight d3? You know, there is, I mean, it almost kind of works in some sense because your rook is trapped, right? So I could actually get this rook, but there's going to be an idea. Okay, there's queen c5 here, but I was also thinking maybe at some point there could be d4. And the point is that after takes, king takes, I've gotten two pieces for the rook. And even though the king is a little bit open, I just don't have enough pieces to create any additional threat. So even though that doesn't work right away, that sacrifice.
It is clearly an idea. Yeah, I agree here. If only the queen could not join, as you said, queen c5 looks like a really active move. Plus, the pair of bishops of the white bishops becomes super strong with all of the pawns gone. Because the position gets such an open dynamics. But yeah, it's clearly something to always include in your calculations.
But Arjun will also look to play something like bishop c3 if he can. That would be a great accomplishment for his position because he may be able to neutralize the pressure on this diagonal. But if the knight's not in d4, then Hikaru may have a knight to b5. So yeah, Hikaru is definitely realizing that, well, not realizing, but he understands that he's got to make some activity, some kind of long-term advantages or activity go his way here. Because if Arjun is given time and he can play like knight g3 and, okay, even bishop c3 and a4, you know, all these different moves, if he's able to get them without much fuss, he will just be up a pawn. So definitely need to find a way to prevent from easily getting all his pieces into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really tempted to play c5 here. I know it's bad because the pawn is not defended.
Be aggressive. Yeah.
If only we could make it work, then I think black would be fine. But like, yeah, I think bishop f6, maybe rook g8 first. Like, I don't think it really matters in which order, but yeah, these two moves is definitely on his mind. I mean, there is move knight c6, but
yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
you're trading more. We get rook g8. Yeah, that makes. I mean, the rook's on the open file. You get out of the fork, and you realize that the pawn at f5, you're not getting that pawn anytime soon. So might as well shove the rook over. I think Arjun will quickly play knight g3.
Yeah.
since you develop that knight. And yeah, whether Hikaru plays bishop f6 immediately or looks for another way to activate his pieces, we will it will remain to be seen. But yeah, we could see that this move from Arjun, this pawn d3, one little pawn move, has been very annoying because somehow I can't get my knights into more active squares here. And on the contrary, even though d5 looked like a very natural move for Hikaru to get space in the center, it created a surprising weakness, right? This outpost on e6 could
Yeah.
become a problem in the near future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you always realize that afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Looked
Yeah.
good, but it doesn't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Even c5 would have been possible with the pawn on d6.
Yeah, if you had the pawn back
If you
here
really
without,
wanted
yeah,
to, yeah.
if you really want, yeah. So we'll see. Yeah, I was calling that Hikaru will play a5 at some point. He still hasn't. I mean, I'm still keeping that prediction, of course, but that could have been a preferable pawn move, right? That a5, rook a6, when we were seeing it, we really liked it. Oh, the rook can come over, the rook can come over, right? There were so many opportunities for that rook on the 6th rank. So we'll see if that still comes to pass. I'm also curious real
Yeah,
quick.
but a5 now, doesn't
Mhm.
it allow white also to attack a5 quickly?
Since the
Well, I
bishop is
suppose
targeting
Arjun
it.
will play 96 eventually, so
Mhm.
that's not a problem then. I was just worried about knight b3.
Oh, if the pawn starts getting targeted. Mhm.
Yeah, but I think
But I could
yeah,
always maybe play c6 if I really need to defend it.
yeah, and I think rook a6 b6 maneuver is just too strong, especially
Yeah.
with the on h8,
Mhm.
while the white queen is actually not targeting anything at the moment. It is being targeted instead. But yeah, maybe Arjun also will do the same eventually with queen h1.
I'm looking at some pretty fairy tale lines here in my mind. Okay, so this knight's, let's say you go here, and I'm thinking, I'm trying to go crazy. I'm like, can I just still sacrifice it? Like takes and just create all sorts of threats here. But the problem is there's actually a very annoying move that we mentioned earlier, and it's coming up again. It's queen c5. And the issue is that the queen is actually threatening mate first. So you're not in time to, do anything on the aggressive of your own. You need to meet this threat. So you can play something like c6, but now this king is actually a lot more vulnerable. This is of course premature, but again, I'm
Yeah,
trying to see if there's some way, because it does make some sense if you get all three of these pieces attacking. But the problem is even c3 here is quite fine. I was thinking in some positions if I could take on b2 and take c3, but not here. So looks a bit unlikely that any attack will come right away. Hikaru will need to continue to bring in his pieces before something aggressive like that can be truly considered.
yeah. Yeah, only if black manages to bring both knights to closer to the king, then maybe something is possible, but so does white.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. What is Arjun is actually thinking about here?
Yeah, I mean, aside from knight g3,
F2?
he can either
Maybe
move the
bishop
queen or
g3.
bishop g3. Yeah, maybe he's thinking of this move, but I mean, it makes some sense. But I kind of want my bishop on e1 because it feels like
I
I want
agree.
to go this way. After bishop
Yeah.
e6, we're still having these threats. Let's say you go 96. Apparently, this position, this actually, Peter says, you don't have to worry. You go a5,
Well,
it's equal. We're getting a nice attack. And I think having the bishop not controlling this diagonal, not having the option of bishop c3 is really hurting white's chances to properly meet these threats. So he can't be, well, he could be considering that, but it wouldn't be a good move. Maybe he wants to move the queen e3 or something. But now, again, the queen is a little vulnerable right now. These ideas might actually have some more bite
Yeah, exactly.
Let's say knight to e6. Apparently, you could just still go a5, but I would be already thinking about. I mean, the problem is, I guess there's always queen c5, but I was going to say a move like knight g4 would not be completely out of the realm of possibilities. But white always has some king side, some counter threats here as well. I'm going through every move that he could play, right? The other one is queen f2, and I would say same thing. The queen here is
Yeah.
a little bit vulnerable. So, what do you think he's thinking about?
I think it's between moving the queen and moving the knight. Maybe he's trying to activate his queen more, but I think it's already on the best diagonal, to be honest. Yeah, Arjun is a very deep thinking player. He always has this almost meditative look on his face, just looking away from the board and calculating, or I don't know, maybe he's not even thinking about chess. Who knows?
Yeah, he's thinking about dinner.
Maybe. Or his confession. Maybe he's thinking what to say in the next one. Shall we have a quick look at other games, maybe?
Absolutely. I'm actually a little surprised that we haven't had a Hikaru confession, but I see he's not in the board. So perhaps that's what he's doing. Let's go around the take a little tour. Oh, let me flip it back to white, excuse me. So when we left this Vincent game, we saw he was down 40 minutes, which is still around the same. So this was our position: bishop e2, bishop f6, knight f2. It feels like Vincent's pretty cramped here. Knight comes to g6, h5, knight e7. So Vincent gets this knight away from the g6 square. Nice little tactic with knight e5. You cannot take the pawn to h5 because you'll get forked. So the knight sneaks into the central outpost. And it stays there. Jan wants it out of there. He's attacking it with all his might. But bishop c3. So it's a huge battle,
Wow,
right, for
that
this
knight
square.
is everything is defending it. Only
And everything's
only
attacking
four
it.
and everything is attacking it. Only f4 is missing.
Yeah, but if you play f4, then you're giving up your own square. So it's
Yeah.
possible that I'm going to jump
Yeah.
in and attack. So yeah, big positional struggle for the central e5 square. And Jan still stays quite ahead of the clock.
Yeah, Vincent actually is gonna end up in time trouble very soon.
Yeah, it is hard to avoid that against Nepo, though. But interesting battle here for the e5 square. What about Magnus? How's he looking? When we last left, it looked like Nordebek was really being aggressive. We had d5 and now h5 and c4. So what is this? The flying V? What do we call this formation?
Not sure. Wooden shield?
Maybe. But we get c4, h4. Both sides just pushing forward. We get a little bit of simplifications. I guess we'll see a long castles here from Magnus. Indeed we do. Yeah, kind of makes sense because the rook on a1 is completely blocked. b6, h3. Okay, so it's funny. There was a a lot of clashing of the pawns, and now it's like now they're just blocked, right? Now it's no one can really move forward. You can't. At some point, actually, if I'm black, I would maybe love to do this move. Maybe Norderbeck can start some aggressive a-file push. It's still possible to castle this way, by the way. The rooks have not moved.
Funny, he needs to bring the queen away.
Yeah, maybe just like queen g7. So it is Magnus's move. So let's say he plays, okay, rook e1. Like, what if I go here? And I don't know. Yeah, then here, can I just castle? And my idea is like maybe I can try to push these pawns for the attack. So that could be something on his mind. Because I'm not too worried about being checkmated here. Can't really. Well, I guess you can't push, but then you'll be splitting up your own pawns. So this could actually get exciting if we get an opposite side castling position. But Norderbeck can also, of course, just keep his king where it is.
But do you think Magnus improved his position a little bit since we last looked?
It definitely clarified a lot because it looked like there was a lot more tension with the pawns. Now it's more stable, right? Magnus has the connect 4. He's got this outpost on the 4 square. If he can get his knight here, that would be a big win for him, I think. But there is dynamic potential if Nordebek's able to, for example, push
A5,
E4 at a good
A4.
moment. Yeah, of course, A5, A4 as well. But I think Magnus, he is not one to let these moves sneak through. So we'll see. I mean, he might end up getting a grip on the position, right? With knight c3, bishop e4, and then, especially if Nordebek's king stays on the queen side, we might see Magnus being the one to start making pawn pushes here. So for that reason, I actually think castling on the long short side could be a serious consideration. But it feels like
Yeah.
Magnus is really stabilizing the game.
Yeah, I agree. Like keeping it flexible for Nordebek makes sense. Maybe for now he can just shuffle. I actually like the bishop h8, queen g7 maneuver to swap them. But then I guess Magnus will quickly block that pawn on e5, and you're never getting to sacrifice it.
Yeah, if you could flip this battery, but yeah, White's not gonna play ball, right? Going to blockade the square immediately. So
Yeah.
I don't think e4 will be easy to achieve. But big decision for Nordebek. Does he keep the king? Does he castle the king? We'll let him think about that. We also got MVL and Fabi. Their game has really changed, I feel, since we last saw it. We last saw right here with d6, d3. e5 was played, fighting for the center. Knight b3, c6. Takes, knight takes, bishop back. Okay, this feels a little... I wouldn't be so happy if I had to go bishop f3 and bishop e2 in such short order, but the alternative was you give up the bishop and then the light square bishop for black is going to be completely unopposed. So we get bishop e2, knight to e7. I feel like black is pretty comfy here. My knight is active. My pawns take away some squares from your pieces going forward.
Yeah,
Bobby's position is good. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, White still needs to finish the development, and I feel like for Fabi it's probably a little bit easier. I like the ideas with rook a6, bishop b6, targeting the queen. And I guess the bishop on e8 does not even need to be moving anywhere yet, because the king is already safe and he doesn't really need to connect the rooks if he's playing rook a6 anyway, but he also can play bishop f7, target the knight. While for white, I'm struggling to find any targets, because like the bishop f2 does not target anything, right? There is no pawn there, nothing.
It feels like Maxime is a bit passive here for now. Of course, he still needs to bring the knight. Like his pieces are all confined to the bottom 2 rows, whereas it feels like Fabi will be looking to, bring the pieces out a little bit more actively. We get c4, so
yeah, we
he
see
does not want to be passive.
Maxime trying to fix that. Like you can clearly see, you just look at the pieces, right? There is 3 pawn/pieces of Fabi's on the 5th rank, and it was only 1 pawn of MVL. So that clearly shows that Fabi has more like domination on the board. It's not crucial, but it's something. So now Maxime is doing this move, but it comes with some disadvantages, right? It really weakens the king's side, king, queen, king's position. Yeah, opens the diagonal, weakens b3, weakens b4, which can be immediately used as an outpost.
Yeah, this is a bit... I'm trying to figure out what was the idea of c4. Was Maxime worried about the knight jumping in or something?
Preventing d5.
Yeah, but it's you know, we say pawns never go backwards. So once you push it,
Yeah.
you can't undo some of the like you mentioned b4, right? That's just a permanent weakness. You know, if
Yeah.
black ever gets a knight there or something, the b2 pawn is always going to be backwards. And like you said,
Yeah,
the
if
king
rook
is
gets to
actually
b6,
Mhm.
he will have really big troubles defending his king because the b2 pawn can only be defended by other pieces now. You cannot put it on b3 and get it protected by the other pawn because it's now delayed behind everything else. Mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
wondering, like, there is no d4 idea because c4 is attacked by two pieces.
but look at this move, Murray. What about bishop g6? Isn't this very annoying? Like you mentioned, the king is weakened. I'm just threatening to play f4,
mhm,
and then I'm spoiled. I can take d3. I can take c4 potentially, even with the queen. Right after I've played f4, that could
yeah,
be a move. I don't know how to. I'm trying to pass a move, but let's say I play bishop c3. Okay, sure, this is a reasonable move. f4. Let's say you take the pawn. Now I have, yeah, lots of options here. All seem great for black. This could be a move that Maxime really regrets here with the long term and, to be honest, even short term weaknesses. So, good moment for us to have stopped by this game. This could be a
yeah,
pivotal
yeah. This
decision.
could be the crucial decision, which will turn out to be crucial for Maxime's
For the
game.
result of the game, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, Fabi probably will take some time here because this is the crucial moment. He's, as you said, spoiled for choices now. He can play bishop g6, bishop f7. He can bring the rook a6, b6. Yeah, yeah, a lot of initiative for Fabi.
And speaking of taking some time here, I'm a little surprised as we swing back to
Did
Hikaru's
Arjun fall
game.
asleep?
He might have, but he just made a move right as we
After
jump back.
17, 18 minutes.
Yeah, was it really that long? It didn't. I guess it was, right? Because analyzed, we analyzed, we went to all the other games, we came back.
Yes. He just gave us time to analyze. What a nice man.
Yeah. Yeah. First he gave us the confession, now he gave us the break to look at the other games. He's has our best interest at heart. But he ends up playing knight g3, right? This is the move we said, hey, his knight's all the way in the corner. Why not bring it out? Completely defend the pawn and make Hikaru have to work to prove compensation. So Hikaru is now up in time. Of course, it's not really a huge factor just yet, but yeah, I'd love to know what Arjun was thinking about there. And I'd also love to see how Hikaru continues. I would imagine bishop f6 is high on his radar to activate that bishop, but maybe he has some other ideas as well.
Yeah, it does look very logical, developing the piece with, I guess, already threats like knight takes d3 is even a threat immediately. So
Yeah, big threat.
yeah, because now no 96 would not come with any any tempo.
Mhm.
Yeah, and actually it would immediately expose b2. Maybe Arjun was thinking because of this, because he was not happy with any moves here that he has. Maybe he was trying to justify this position.
Yeah, certainly he was not just thinking about one move, he was thinking many, many
Yeah.
moves ahead. And perhaps, you know, he saw something here that we haven't seen just yet. I mean, I'm wondering, you know what I'm thinking about? Is there a move like h5 here? This could looks very logical too, right? Why not target this knight, especially as we have a pin on the g file? So perhaps it was a move like this that was also giving him some pause, since it's comes with a pretty big threat on the g file. We're
Yeah,
also getting word
yeah,
there's
I
no other
actually saw it.
confessions yet, by the way. So
Yeah, it's
that's,
really
yeah,
weird.
surprising.
Hikaru, I guess, Well, I guess he did get lower on time. If he plays now quickly, he might have time for confession.
Well, while Arjun was thinking, I saw Hikaru was not in the board, and then he came back, I believe,
You
with a
think he
cup.
might have gone to the confession?
I actually don't think so because he probably thought maybe, I mean, I don't know. It depends, right? I feel like you go to the confession when you feel like your opponent is going to take a lot of time, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know if he thought this was necessarily the moment. I don't know
Yeah,
if
you
you've
don't
ever had
expect him
this.
to spend so much time, right?
Right. I mean, at least we did it. I was going to say this is kind of similar but different. I don't know if you had this. Sometimes I try to time my restroom breaks during my game. I'm like, is my opponent gonna start thinking here? And I'll go to the restroom on their move. Because sometimes you go and then you come back and they made a move right away. And then you lose several minutes. So I'm always like, that's my timing of during the game. Maybe the players have similar ideas in mind for their confession.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And the cards are about to make a move. I saw him reaching over. Let's see what he's got in mind. So far, we've considered h5, bishop f6. What about a5? That move was suggested many, many times by our engine.
Yeah, it would be ironic to play it now when the engine the least expects it. No, bishop f6.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, the knight is a target. Knight e6 could be played. Now maybe we can play a5. Maybe we can play h5 as well. Kicking, yeah, if we can play h4, this knight has to go somewhere a little strange.
I guess he
either
can
you
also
go
move
back.
the queen out of the pin instead.
Yeah, the best move here would be queen c5 because you get a tempo. But let's say you don't play there. Let's just, for example, say you play queen f2. After something like h4, I thought maybe this could be awkward for white's pieces since you're boxing them in. But I suppose it's temporary. The knight can reroute to some better squares.
I think white is actually happy with the knight being kicked out of knight g3 because they want to reroute the knight anyway.
Yeah, perhaps I overestimated that idea. Sometimes you feel good. Oh, I'm attacking you. But then your opponent moves away. You're like, oh,
I think he did play, right? 96 is on the board.
Is it? Yes, there we go. 96 comes quickly from Arjun. 13 seconds. So obviously, when he thought for 18 minutes, he already anticipated this position. Yeah, for sure.
So maybe a5 now. Do you think this might happen? Like, I feel a little reluctant weakening the king, but this rook needs to join the game eventually.
Yeah, I'm curious. How do we meet this move now? Since it's threatening mate.
Yes, knight c6.
Just knight back, and you also open up a threat on b2.
Attacking b2.
And if you play something like c3, we continue with a4. Now we have rook a5 as well.
Yeah.
Keep him out, and then a3 is coming as well. So all of a sudden, great activity for black. So perhaps a5 here is quite reasonable.
And if a4, then we just play
maybe we go rook a6, right? Maybe we continue with the rook lift. And
rook a3.
funnily enough, rook a3 is the best.
Yeah.
And then you actually have to be a little careful. Both players do, since the a pawns are targets. If you go rook b6, well, actually, even this is kind of weird. Wait, check this out. We have rook takes b2.
Okay, king
now
b2.
I go check.
Bishop. No.
But I'm down. You have bishop c7 is the issue. And my knight is also very much far from home.
Yeah. Well, you also need to be careful with knight c7 ideas. Followed by queen c5 and all that stuff.
Oh, yes. Yeah, good. Well, that's the nice thing about rook a6, right? So I see. So basically, there are going to be some cases where if you can't block the check, you might actually end up dropping the knight, right? But
This reminds me of that game Gukesh against Hikaru from Weissenhaus, where he sacrificed the bishop on c5 the same way and brought the
Mhm.
queen over, and it was back and forth. Both players had chances, but it was quite a sound bishop sacrifice because there was only one way Hikaru was avoiding to get a lost position.
that was
So
not a game that I saw, but we'll see if we can get a sacrifice in this game.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, other than a5, okay, here we go. I was going to say, I wonder what Hikaru can play. He goes knight c6. Okay, very logically, he's opening up this battery. Not many ways to defend the pawn. Basically, just c3, since d4, I can just take it.
Mhm.
Nothing else makes sense. So c3, I think let's stay with these guys a little longer because I'm curious. I feel that's the only move for Arjun. And then will Hikaru play a5, right? That's the move we've been clamoring for quite some time.
Yeah, and I also like knight c6 because it's a preemptive measure against queen c5. So now if Arjun wants to get out of that pin, he cannot do it with a tempo. And if he does go to c5, Hikaru has a choice of, I don't know, b6 or a5, a4. Yeah, at least it doesn't come with a direct threat on checkmate.
Right. And then at e5, it didn't really have any forward prospects either. So perhaps it was a good moment to retreat it out of the way and look for a better pasture.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think c3 will happen. Let's put it on the board. And again, it's kind of funny. You have these dual-sided options, right? Going on. I like a5 because again, the rook, right? Let's get in the game. Although it could be better. But you know what's nice about this situation is that after rook a6, you don't have to worry about this pawn at all since the bishop is blocked and the knight also defends it. So this could give some extra reason to some extra support to lifting the rook to b6 at this point.
Yep.
We're
Well,
getting some moves, by the way.
So he did
Very quick
calculate
d4.
ahead. C3 was quite quickly. I don't know. What do you think about C3? It's
It's c3, but Hikaru goes d4 immediately.
yeah.
So a little bit surprised because well, I guess this diagonal was already getting closed. Maybe Hikaru, well, here's the thing. I was going to say maybe white can play d4, but that comes with a cost that my knight can start jumping in. So Hikaru goes, of course, if he could shred this open, he'll, like, if white takes, this is just fantastic for us, right? Now we have this extremely powerful battery. But Arjun will definitely not take. So what's Hikaru planning? Because c4 seems very logical to keep this blocked. So I'm curious what Hikaru. Obviously, he's okay with the structure. I mean, he played d4 in 13 seconds. He has foreseen this position. But I'm curious how he's going to play it out. I mean, maybe still a5. Maybe, well, you can't even castle. It's not even. Oh, you can castle. Wait a minute. You can? I thought. Well, it's a bad move, of course, because d8 would just be hanging. But I thought it
Yeah,
would be
but
illegal. But it's
no,
not.
so the king, it depends where the king is. Like,
Uh-huh.
if the king does need to jump over that attacked square, then you cannot move. So the same rules apply, but it depends where the king is at the beginning. So because it doesn't need to move over that square,
Yeah.
it's fine. But of course, you
Basically,
don't
I could
want to
castle as long
castle.
as c8 is not attacked.
Yeah,
Makes
but of
sense.
course, you don't want to do that and lose an exchange. Oh, he did play c4.
Yeah, I mean, it was forced, right? Otherwise, you're going to be facing the wrath of the Queen Bishop battery. And now I would imagine Hikaru is going to play quickly again because when you make a move like d4, you must have a follow-up to your opponent's reply of c4.
Yeah, yeah, see. So maybe c5 might be played as well. Well, I mean, the bishop on f6 is blocked, but I think I'd rather have our pawn on d4 rather than the white pawn on d4. And maybe Arjun would have played d4 himself, if not Hikaru.
Yeah, I was wondering if Hikaru was worried about d4 from Arjun as well. But
Yeah.
let's see. It looked like
But I think
Hikaru.
now a5 becomes even better because if
You
he
can't
plays
play
a4, it will be very similar situation as in
Like C.
MBL's position where he
Yeah.
played c4, right? With this outpost on b4 and b2 pawn being left alone at the starting position. I think Hikaru might play a5 here. It does look very logical.
And I think I saw someone say in the chat earlier that the move a5 has been played in every other game with the black players playing black all played a5. So Hikaru is maybe will join the party here.
Yeah, now it's the perfect moment. To be honest, I also don't see many moves that improve his position. I feel like the bishop on e8 is actually in the best place because once you move it to one side, you cannot really control the other.
Mhm.
Same like for the knights. You always think about which piece is the worst in the position, and currently the choice I think falls under the rook. Yeah, on the rook.
To be honest, I think now the queen on h8 might join the conversation. Earlier, it was definitely quite powerful, but now with this pawn on d4 blocking your battery, the queen definitely loses some of its strength, but it could actually be supportive of pushing the h pawn. And not only does pushing the h pawn, create this threat, you also give some room to the queen. So that's why both of those moves are high on our radar, right? Both a5 and h5, because you have these two very powerful pieces, right? The queen and rug, those are the strongest pieces in the game. Neither piece contributing as of right now.
Yeah, on the other hand, is not knight c4 sacrifice sometimes becoming like possible, viable?
Mm-hmm.
Like of
Definitely
course,
after the rook lift, right? I mean, I see
yeah.
what you're trying to
After
do.
well, rook on b6, of course, also will be attacked by that pawn c5 fork, but it's still something to consider for white. Still a possibility.
Yeah,
Hmm.
not maybe on the next couple moves, but something
Yeah.
that we would love to set up in the future. But yeah, the issue is, of course, Hikaru remains down this pawn that he sacrificed. I'm finding this e6 knight very annoying and not surprisingly so because it's on an outpost in my own position, right? So the knight is putting a lot of pressure and controlling lots of squares in my camp. But getting
Yeah.
rid of it is also not easy. So you kind of have to play around it, I would think.
I don't think Hikaru missed c4, but I think it did not look as good as it becomes the more you think about it, because like you usually don't want to play a move like that and fix your opponent's pawn in the center, unable to like shake that pawn on d4. Yeah, leaving the pawn on d3 behind and weak, a bit weaker. Then there is an outpost in e3. Like usually you don't want to put the pawn there, but here, yeah, the more you look at it, the more sound this move becomes. So maybe he did underestimate it, but you cannot really consider every single move every single time you make a move at the in chess. But I think
I would,
Hikaru is
yeah. I don't think he missed it, but I think perhaps because he's taking a bit, because he played d4 in 13 seconds. So I'm sure he had a follow up that he was going to play. But now maybe he's second guessing this follow up, or maybe he sees something else like, oh, I was going to do this, but now I'm seeing another idea. But in either case, Arjun has gotten up from the board. Perhaps he will give us some more interviews to work with. We will go on a short break. Feels like Hikaru will take a moment to make a move here. So we'll let him think and come back and see what he decides. And welcome back, everyone. We have plenty of moves after our break. Maria, let's catch up. We were debating, will Hikaru push one of his rook pawns, or flank pawns, I should say. He goes with h5. We've been talking about a5 and h5 for a while now. So h5 comes with the threat. h4, let's win the knight. But Arjun strikes first. He plays c5. This move is consistent with his last couple of moves, c3, c4, now we get c5. And Hikaru retreats his knight to the c8 square, which seems quite logical, doesn't get the full engine's approval. There are not that many choices. If you go to b5, that knight can be very short of the squares after a4.
Yeah.
So Hikaru goes to c8, but look at Arjun's position. He's got these two pawns deep in Hikaru's position. He's got the knight on e6. Where's Hikaru's compensation coming for the pawn?
Yeah, it does seem like it's harder and harder to justify that Hikaru's gambit. Yeah, I guess h4 is still a threat that Arjun is probably going to tackle with the queen move. I suppose the pawn on c5 should be a weakness, but how do you get to it? That knight on e6 is restricting movement of all of the pieces. If only we could swing a queen, maybe h7, e7 to attack it, but you still need to get rid of the knight. It all takes a lot of time. So yeah, the advantage in a pawn might become more and more sound for Arjun.
He plays queen f2, getting out of the way of the g-file pin. The c5 pawn, it is gaining a lot of space for white. It's also restricting Hikaru's knight from coming out. And another idea that I just realized, that the bishop on d1, it has a lot of flexibility. You can move it to f3 potentially, or you could move it to b3. So both diagonals look like they would be quite appealing. Earlier in the game, if we're on move 15, if we backtrack a little bit when Hikaru was sacrificing the pawn, kind of started right here, played this move d5, and it still seemed like we have bishop f6 and a5 and knight d6 and rook g8, so many active moves, but Arjun has been playing extremely precisely, finding his own activity, particularly with this really excellent knight maneuver. Now the knight is deep in Hikaru's camp, and seems like it's getting quite tough to whip up this aggressive play for Hikaru. I mean, one idea is that maybe we could copy Arjun, right? Like with our own knight potentially sliding to the outpost on e3, but
Yeah, maybe.
not so easy to achieve, right? Because once I play,
Takes time, and his bishops can prevent our knight from infiltrating.
yeah, for sure. So Hikaru, let's see what I mean, I think he kind of, by the way, this rook, right, still would love to find a way to get it involved. Another idea, by the way, for Arjun that could be pretty annoying to face is, what if he activates the bishop this way? What if he brings the bishop out on this diagonal?
Need to defend that pawn somehow. Maybe bishop e5 could stop that from happening. Or knight e5. Maybe that's the idea as well.
And we do have knight e7. So that's a very clear idea, with the knight potentially hopping to the d5 square. But bishop b3 here looks very annoying, stopping the plan. Maybe Arjun will even castle at this point. I know we were saying that the castling is unlikely, but now it feels like, well, how am I going to get the rook into the game otherwise, right? So maybe we will see a castles at some point.
Yeah, maybe both of them actually will castle, because now with the pawn on d4, rook on d8 will have way more squares than on a8, even after a5. But now also with the pawn on c5, he cannot really develop the rook using a6.
Yeah, there were a lot of positions where we thought getting the rook to b6 could be a very aggressive idea, but the pawn on c5 does dash those hopes. Arjun is thinking, though, By the way, Hikaru did spend 13 minutes on h5, which was preceded by spending 13 seconds at d4. So he definitely did not miss c4, but I think the plan that he had in mind, he realized maybe that plan had a flaw, so he had to backtrack and start again on the drawing board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. He probably maybe missed something after c4 that maybe he did not think c5 is gonna happen. But
Mhm.
once he realized c5 is a move to follow, then all of the plans with a5 went to dust. So that's why he settled for h5. Meanwhile, I want to give a big shout out to all the over 6,000 of people in the chat. We guys need your support. Maybe it's time to spam the
Needs your
flower.
spam. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not over. I like the idea of his 95. If we manage to trade one of the knights for the bishop, it might ease up the position here.
Absolutely. And some other ideas that I would be considering is continuing to play h4. The problem is once you play h4, okay, it's a white to play, but let's say they go bishop e3. The problem is when you play h4, you're kind of helping push the knight into a very active square in the center. One thing that I was considering if I could do it is maybe I can try to sneak my rook into the g2 square, somehow get activity this way. But yeah, in this particular case, one of the very powerful plans for white would be to just gang up on the pawn on c7, which would be quite a vulnerable square in our camp. But perhaps at some point, you've already played h5, maybe you can continue using that pawn. But yeah, Arjun's pieces are getting very strong. First things first, preventing knight d5. Makes sense with bishop b3. Then he can play knight e4. Maybe he can try to bring the bishop out. It feels like we were able to find lots of great improving moves for Hikaru's pieces. Now the shoe's a little bit on the other foot. Now we're looking at ways for Arjun's pieces to come out. And for Hikaru, he needs to play a little bit more defensively now. Obviously not the optimal outcome, considering he sacrificed the pawn for activity.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe while Arjun is considering his options, we can swing to other positions. I see Fabi is getting some advantage.
Yeah, let's
This
take a look. I'm
first
just
position.
thinking we go in order.
Yeah,
By the
let's
way,
do
this was the game where we had the huge wrestling match for the e5 square. And
Yeah.
Vincent said, okay, get out of here. I'm getting the e5 square no matter what. But this came at a price. This came at a price that you gave him the e4 square. So let's fast forward. So bishop a3, but you don't really want to take this knight because then all that work you put in, you lose the square. So he doesn't
Then
do
the
that.
knight also has nowhere to go. You have
Yeah,
to
well, you
trade.
would have to trade. Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
feels like why would he put in all that effort just to trade his knight? So Nepo ends up trading it off. Makes a couple of trades actually. And okay, here's where we're at. The knight in e4, of course, is a beast, but can always be captured. The pawn on h5 needs attention. So I'm wondering if Nepo will get ambitious here at some point and try to set up some kind of c5 break. That looks like that would be his primary source of counterplay, or not counterplay, just play in general, if he wants to go in that direction. But overall, looks like a very solid position for both sides.
Do you think it might end up all closed up and the players just won't have any ways of advancing in this position?
I think that there's still ideas that could be tried. Obviously, both sides have breaks on the C file. I also wonder if we can shuffle the queen and bishop to create more pressure on h5. We get this knight d2, so I guess, I mean, well, I don't know if the knight would go to f3 because then I feel like I will be able to trade it off. So I'm not fully sure about this knight d2. Maybe it's a little bit of a troll move, like, hey, knight d2. All right, never mind, I just come back.
Just tickling.
Yeah, just flexing the knight moves, just putting in the opponent's camp here because I'm not Like if I just play queen e3, what am I? Because
I
if you
just
go knight f3,
just
then
go
I'm
back.
yeah, you just go back. So I'm not sure
Well,
what
Vincent
Nepo's
is
going for.
getting lower and lower on time, so Nepo is not risking anything. He's just making moves.
Yeah, maybe just like a move to get like a weird move to get Vincent to spend a bit. Like what? Knight d2? And then he's just gonna go back to e4. And his idea was that he gained 2 minutes more on the clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
But objectively, Vincent is he doesn't have any weaknesses. His pawn chain is very, very solid. His bishop on a3 has a good diagonal, so objectively, his position should be okay. But practically, we might see Nepo get aggressive. Maybe he could go rook g7. The idea is that the rook could swing over after you play c5. So we'll see if that's what Nepo wants to do, or if Vincent might find a way. Okay, Nepo does go to f3, so he was not messing around. He was actually going there. But what is he going to do on bishop e2? Perhaps he wants to bait Vincent into taking this knight. Let me show why. Because now, with the opposite color bishops, maybe he'll try to build some pressure on these diagonals and files. Interesting. So he's willing to sacrifice a pawn because after bishop f3, I'm taking that knight. So we'll see. And that's what Vincent plays in the game, by the way, bishop e2. So we might see a pawn sacrifice. But then it's opposite color bishops, so maybe that's
Yeah,
what Nepo
interesting.
wants.
I guess he's trying to capitalize on the time disadvantage of Chimer and play something he doesn't expect. Yeah, double up on the triple up,
Triple up. Yeah.
the Alekhine's gun.
Yeah, you could put the we talked about Alekhine's opening, now we got Alekhine's gun.
Yeah,
Lots of
the
Alekhine
spirit of
today.
Alekhines is everywhere. I
Yeah.
think he's also one of the favorite players of Nepo, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was of course famous for his aggressive style and many wonderful attacking games. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe Nepo just wants the Alekhine's gun, paying some tribute to his idol. Let's look. Oh, Matt, I see the eval bar in Max's game is really starting to go up and up and up. We were watching the game at this moment, and check this out. We get queen to g7. This move opens opportunities of e4 and creates some castling chances. Bishop e4 for Magnus. He shuts the door on any e4 pushes. a5. Knight c3. So just, yeah, great stabilization here. Knight goes to d4. We get the trade. Magnus does not hang the checkmate in one. Surprise,
Surprise!
yeah. So a4. So Nordebek is looking to open up the file. b4, keep it closed. Now we get bishop g7, queen f1, a3, queen d3, bishop h6. So this move gets a question mark, but what's so bad about it? Well, obviously he's trying to play g4. Okay, the first move that I would think of for white is either king b1 or bishop e3. Let's say it's king b1. This doesn't seem that obvious. So Magnus does take. He plays the best move. He could win a pawn here, but he won't. Why not? Well, after queen takes, I feel like this is just something that could be very dangerous. Although first you would play g4 in this case. Of course, you get the pawn back. But perhaps the idea is that instead of taking these pawns, we're going to move the king. And now you're stuck with this bishop that just every
Yeah,
single one of your pawns on the dark squares, right?
yeah, you sort of use that pawn on d4 as an umbrella. Black cannot take its own pawn, and it's on the way of its pieces, so they actually would be happy to get rid of it.
By the way, it's still possible to play castles.
Sure.
I feel like that's
I guess
one
it
of
could be
Nordebek's ideas, because if you're playing a5, a4, a3, you might be trying to push all the other pawns as well. You don't want your king to be there when that happens, but the problem is that you can't push any of these pawns. Like Magnus's structure here is ironclad.
Indeed. Yeah, that could be a possibility. Yeah, I don't think Magnus will take on d4.
Yeah, after taking a d4, g4, it looks like, of course, it's a check. You move the king. Now, after takes, this is getting pretty nasty. Lots of activity here for black. So the best move is just to move the king out of the way and try to leave Nordebek with a very restricted bishop. And the king c2 is on the board. But the engine says you can still play g4. Why is that? Well, if you take with the f-pawn, I'm just going to defend this pawn on d4. Next is try to get my rook to e8. And then perhaps I can get my rook to f2 if everything goes swell. And if you take with the h-pawn, wow, look at this, h3. You just sacrifice all the pawns. You give your opponent 3 connected passers. But after bishop e3, you're going to try to get them back. What does Nordebek do? We do have the moves. He goes g4. He is not sitting by watching Magnus squeeze the life out of him.
Yeah. He's just sacrificing with every move. So when is Magnus gonna take?
He's offering plenty of pawns here. But this is I think this is a great idea, because if you don't do that, let's say you play king b7. Well, first of all, you play the queen, but let me play, I don't know. Well, I can't go king a7 either. Where do I even go? Let's go rook g8. Just want to make a random move.
Okay.
You're just kind of getting, where's your play? Apparently, even taking a d4 is safe. I mean, it looks pretty scary, I guess, but I'm trying to see if can I build this battery on this diagonal. Apparently, nothing is here. Knight c3, queen g7. Oh, king b3. Yeah, safe. This is the top move, and I've completely
Yeah,
blocked
soon
you.
enough. I guess soon enough he also will go for a3 pawn
Yeah,
because it's overextended. And just to reiterate, the pawn on d4, Magnus can take it anytime because Nordebek cannot defend it. Because after c5, what will happen, chat? Only one legal move is possible after c5.
it's forced.
It's forced, and Passan is forced.
And Maria, we actually have another confession that we're going to hear from Magnus. So right on
Yeah.
time as we're looking
From
at
the
the
man
game.
himself about this
Let's-
position. Let's do it.
Yes, to building on what I said earlier, I think he's definitely not made the most of his position, and I'm now more or less completely stabilized. Trying to win this position is going to be very, very tough. Even though he has no active play, he's still very, very solid. And I kind of had to castle queenside. But if I want to play for a win at some point, I will probably have to walk the king all the way on the other side, which is practically not going to be super easy to do. But I anticipate that the light squared bishops probably will be traded at some point, and yeah, and then I'm just sitting there with the knight on e4. He will either have a knight on d4, maybe on f4, and then we go around. I think it's too risky for me to start pushing on the queen side. So yeah, I really have to try and bring the king around if I want to try and win. It's going to be hard, but we'll see. I think this is one of the peculiarities of Freestyle, that his king is excellently placed in the sense that he can castle to both sides, which I think could be sneakily important. Like once I start attacking, he can just run away in one move. This does, however, mean that he cannot really move his rooks, but I think there are plenty of ways for him to sort of move back and forth without doing that.
And how about that? So much of what
But there
Yeah,
we
very
heard from Magnus.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this comes a couple of moves late because the knight is obviously already gone from d4. But it's interesting that he said exactly the same thing as you. Once I start attacking, at some point the king just swings back to another side and it's gone with the castle. So Magnus
The teleportation, right? That you
teleportation.
king just moves from b8 to g8. But you know what else Magnus said that caught my ears is that he was saying, hey, I had to castle long, but at some point, maybe I'll have to walk my king over to the king side. Obviously, that
pawn forward and
confession
look to
came
make
some
things a
time
bit
ago,
messy.
because as we look at the moves, the king side is no longer safe after Nordebek's
Yeah,
move
after
onto
G4, it's impossible, which means Nordebek was maybe thinking the same. Magnus can find shelter on the king side, but if I do destroy it with G4, and now is the time if I want to do it, and he just went for it. Almost like
Yeah.
reading mind.
Maybe I saw someone said in the chat that last event, Hikaru said you could hear people in the confessional. Maybe, hopefully you couldn't hear them directly, but just hear them, la 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 la, right? Just kind of the sound of talking. Maybe he literally heard Magnus this time, but
Eavesdropping, yeah.
eavesdropping to Magnus takes the pawn. But let's leave these guys alone just for a moment, because we're getting plenty of moves in Hikaru's game, and let's catch up on what they were, because right where we left, I
Yeah, we
believe,
left
was
at 97.
Yep. And we thought that Hikaru was going to try to get his knight to the E3 square. 94, though, from Arjun. He is not worried about it. Perhaps if you go knight d5, even if you allow this 93, I mean, it looks like a win, for our position, but the computer says, that's fine. I have, I mean, what does it say here? You can take, and take, and at this point, the rook is hanging. So anyway, some tactics there. So that's why Arjun ignored it. Hikaru plays knight d5, and here we just get bishop d2, which makes sense, right? Stop him from knight e3.
Yeah. Funny enough, knight d5, another alternative here was again a5. It's interesting how insistent is the engine to play e5 even here, although that move doesn't give us as much benefit as before. Basically only pushing a pawn. The rook cannot really join via a6 anymore.
In Nordebek's game, when we saw he played a5, he was able to actually push the pawn all the way to a3. So perhaps that's an idea Hikaru can do here as well. By the way, it's also possible at some moment to play knight e3 anyway, because if you could open, the problem here is that white could swap off the bishop. But if you take an e3, this looks like something that I might not mind, but incredibly, white's position, especially with the knights, is so, what is that phrase? It's like tactics flow from strategy. The point being here is that even in this position, I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, great, finally, I got what I want. Even here after
my God, that's big.
f6, yeah, you block this off, so now I take the rook, king takes, I'm down in exchange, but apparently
And
this
pawn is
position
pinned,
is
and it's still so crushing.
yeah, I think there's just going to be this threat on c7 at the right, once I unpin, I'm going to play f7. So again, this is not necessarily a likely continuation, but frankly speaking, just kind of shows how difficult the position is getting for Hikaru, because even when you kind of get, oh, boom, I got my counterplay finally, and white still is in the driver's seat. So that's why we see Hikaru spending some time here. And yeah, the top edge move again is a5. We've been mentioning that move several times over and over. I guess at this point, you're not lifting the rook. You're more kind of just creating some space and using the pawn as a battering ram. But if truth is to be told, right now, there's great consolidation coming up from Arjun with his pieces finding extremely sturdy squares. And on top of that, he's up a pawn. So he's really living the life so far.
Yeah, with a5, my only one explanation that I can see is maybe if white does play a4 in order to stop our pawn, we're getting b4 square
Oops.
for the knight.
Yeah. This could be a fresh square.
And actually, it's
for
a big relief.
pieces.
The bar also says so.
Yeah, we have a lot of bar enthusiasts in the chat.
Yeah. Gotta love the bar.
Definitely. Yeah, but the problem is that a4 is not forced. By the way, Hikaru, he definitely needs to start. He does make a move. Bishop d7. Okay, very logical. At least we keep an eye on the knight. on e6.
Yeah. So at
I-
least now, if white does attack on c7 again, we can always take that knight.
Mm-hmm. Also, in these hypothetical variations with knight e3, let me just pretend and play h3 or whatever. Let's say I play knight e3. If we look at that same line we just looked at, there's a huge difference. You cannot play f6, right? Because the knight would be
Mm.
hanging. So I
Yeah.
think Hikaru is trying to potentially set up. I mean, this is just a developing move. That is very logical regardless. But it could be helping us set up this idea to open up the diagonal again.
So what would be the best continuation then?
Well, apparently the best move is to take the bishop, which is at first a little bit surprising because you would think, wow, my knight on e4, that is the bastion. You know, it's a very powerful piece in the center. Bishop on f6 doesn't have many prospects. But once you make this trade, now you completely defang the knight to e3 idea, or you stop at least any threat to the b2 pawn.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently I'm just going to follow the engine line here to demonstrate what's
Yeah,
the
bishop e3
suggestion.
does look very promising because it also sets up that X-ray on the rook.
Uh-huh.
Here maybe just d4 to block it off.
Yeah. Takes, and then what is this line?
All
What
these
is
trades
going?
are maybe in Hikaru's favor, but f passer pawn is quite dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this looks kind of like a big progress is happening for Hikaru because look, he's creating so many. This is again, we're so far from the game now, but this is just a sample live from the engine. I would have
Mhm.
thought this is actually pretty decent, right? It's like it feels like
Yeah.
we're finally getting some activity.
Yeah, no, from human perspective, this is not that easy. Okay, you have an extra pawn, and even active pieces, but so do black, and the king is not absolutely safe there on b1. Neither of kings is safe, so anything can happen.
Yeah, the problem is actually white is threatening rook to d1 in this case. Somehow white still is able to create some threats, but yeah, funky line here for sure. Let's kind of see how we even got here. So the present position is bishop to d7. And yeah, we were saying the top line was to actually take on f6. But if Arjun does not do that, I mean, he can play bishop b3. I guess this might just transpose because I'm definitely going knight e3 now. And then you take my, yeah, we actually could get something along these lines. This looks pretty natural for black. We give up a second pawn, but it's well worth it because now we're finally creating some damage. And by the way, I should remind our viewers and ourselves that yesterday, when Hikaru defeated Arjun, it was kind of similar in the sense that he ended up in a position down a pawn, was able to create a lot of piece counterplay. Actually, in that game, Arjun also had two pass pawns. If you remember, he had the pawn on f5 and e6. He had two passers deep in Hikaru's position, but Hikaru massively maneuvered behind them. And then in a position that the engine was saying, hey, Arjun is winning, Hikaru created so much confusion counterplay that he walked away with the victory. So perhaps we're going to have a little bit of deja vu if things continue in that pattern.
Yeah, to answer the question of chat, yes, we can castle long, but it will probably follow by a quick resignation because it will lose a rook.
Yeah, this is a legal castle.
Well,
But you
an
do give
exchange,
up,
but
yeah, you do give up an exchange. And frankly, why would we do that when the king is already nice and safe? I mean, this rook is not active, but it doesn't mean I want it off the board. And that is also why a5 was the move at many points. Now my prediction is starting to be in a little bit of jeopardy because I was saying, of course he'll play a5. But Hikaru so far has not been playing ball with that assumption.
yeah.
Thank you.
So currently bishop d7 is still the last move, right?
Bishop d7 is the last move. Yep. And Hikaru gets up from the board. However, yeah, we've only had two confessions, and as the players are starting to get lower and lower on time, I would not expect any more from today. Although, who knows? Maybe we'll get sneak one in. The time control. The time you have right now is the time you have for the game with the 30-second increment.
Mhm.
So no second bonus time control, move 40, move 60, move
Yeah,
whatever.
what you have left is all you have plus 30 seconds per move. So the more Arjun thinks, the more chance he will get into enough time pressure to not to play as good anymore. Like that knight on e6 obviously makes everyone scared. I am scared, but there are still chances here. Like, okay, how do you actually proceed here? Currently, everything seems to be defended. He cannot even attack on c7 easily, unless he trades the bishop with a bishop f4, but we probably will be happy to trade that.
Yeah, maybe we can. Well, I would be more happy trading over here. But I was gonna say, I guess we have like bishop e5
Knight
moves.
f6, yeah.
Yeah. We could start. Also, at some point, we could eliminate the knight.
Oh,
which
we
is one
can
of
we can
the-
take that knight. Yeah, we can take
can
that
take
knight
it.
and then maybe
Mhm.
play knight e3.
Yeah,
In
although
fact,
here we got to be
already
a little
did.
careful, right? The queen on the f-file will open, but
Ah, right.
certainly,
But maybe we're just fine with bishop e7.
yes, slide it out of the way. And then we
That's
then we go knight e3 after, right?
fine.
Now
And
we can-
c5 might get in trouble as well. I mean, the pawn on e6 also will get attacked by all the pieces, and you cannot easily defend with white. h5 is very useful here, preventing bishop g4.
yeah, this looks like it's actually the pressure is lessening on Hikaru's position with the elimination of the knight on e6. I think that Arjun is definitely calculating some of these lines where Hikaru does get to play knight e3. He sacrifices the pawn. He gets activity. Again, something like bishop to b3 looks quite tempting. You develop, you hit the knight. The knight is also responsible for defending c7. But after knight e3, okay, first of all, if you take and I take, this is probably not what you want. Apparently, this is playable, but this is getting very messy. There's no reason I think that, yeah, I mean, this is possible, but I don't imagine Arjun seriously maybe considering this because it just feels like you don't need to do this to have a good position. Apparently, he's still better according to the engine, but I mean, pawn's pinned, you're down in exchange. Looks like a little bit of a mess. So that's why we were saying, hey, you could also take on f6 first. But this position, you know, especially to the human eye, it looks a little bit loose. Like the rook in the second rank is strong. You get d4. Now the engine is saying to take on e6. I'm curious, can I not go a5 here? Oh, okay. Well, the reason that apparently this is a mistake is pretty sneaky.
No, no. Now
The-
you do it?
Now you do it. And after a4, you hit a tempo on the rook. And white's dominant here. So yeah, these castlings are still in the air.
This is what it is. I finally realized why a5 is still recommended by the engine.
Okay.
We developed the rook not with rook a6 lift. We play king a7.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
that's what it is. I was trying to understand why a5 is still a thing.
Mhm.
Finally it came to me. Finally.
It could be
Yeah.
an option as well. Yeah. The simply connecting the rooks, especially if you're able to get this rook into the second rank, right? You would love to support it with its brother from the queen side. But
From
Arjun's
the
got 12 minutes. If he
yeah.
spends a bit more time, yeah, brother from another mother over there, but
From another king's mother. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm happy with watching Arjun thinking longer and longer. But then maybe we don't need to play a5. Can we play a6, or is it too passive?
I feel like a5 gives some flexibility, right? Because you also
Yeah,
do
I
keep this
guess it
option.
hides our real intentions a little bit as well.
Yeah, gives us a couple of different options. Hikaru taking a little bit of a breather. I see he's got what looks to be a cup of tea maybe at the board.
Hmm.
So maybe he's getting a fresh brew for the home stretch of the game.
For those of you in chat who were asking what is so green and disgustingly looking, I'm drinking, it's matcha.
Yeah, but is it matcha coffee?
It's
Matcha
just
latte,
matcha
sorry.
with some blueberries.
Very healthy.
I didn't have any ice, so I used some frozen blueberries.
Need that liquid boost for the no doubt exciting finishes that all 4 games are still going. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're keeping a big eye on Arjun against Hikaru, but all the other games are also in play. So
Oh,
we will.
actually, no.
Oh.
One game just finished.
I just saw that flash on my screen. That's what I get. Wait a minute. Let's come to the game. Okay,
It's
so
a
this game
draw.
ends in a draw. The last thing we saw here was this
It
knight
did get-
maneuver.
It did end up sort of semi-closed, but the main reason, I guess, is the opposite colored bishops. But yeah, let's see how. I
Yeah,
feel
so
like this knight f3 was a little bit of a typical Nepo fun move, which maybe spoiled his chances a little bit.
yeah, I thought if he's trying to be aggressive here, at some point you probably want to go c5, but maybe he didn't want to be aggressive. He's like, all right, well,
Yeah, maybe it
look-
was not safe to do it. Also, he's playing with black pieces. Tomorrow he will have white.
yeah. I don't know how much they value having the white, but certainly is an advantage. And as we've seen, yes, now we have the rook trade as well, which is just everything's getting traded. Okay, so this is just one of the deadest draws you could have with all the opposite color bishops, and the players are in move 44, so presumably they were free to offer each other draws. So there you go. Nepo, he picked Vincent, he drew Vincent. Tomorrow he can knock him out either in the tiebreaks or in the classical. We have a move. We do have a move from Arjun, who went down to 10 minutes before playing bishop to b3, which is a very, and immediately we get 93. So we might get that line on the board that we were analyzing. So Hikaru plays a little, there was a Capiano Caruana earlier. Now we have we can't really make a good rhyme with
Copiano.
Arjun. He's copying Arjun, I was going to say. Copy Geisy with the 93 and 996. And I think you have to take it because I'm hitting the rook and I'm also hitting rook g2.
I love rook g2 idea even more than attacking the rook, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to go rook g1, I doubt you want to just tolerate the knight for long. And by the way, look at this. Takes. Okay, let's go a5. It's about time.
Finally, yeah, this
It's
is
about
where,
time to make it happen, yeah?
yeah. Arjoined, I like this one. Arjoined.
Yeah, or joined him in the knight stance. So Arjun is pondering 93, but he thought for 12 minutes on bishop b3. He must have foreseen this continuation, and what we expect or what we suppose could happen is after, well, if you take immediately, what you're doing is that you're opening up the dormant diagonal.
Hmm.
If you take the pawn, you drop b2, but if you don't take the pawn, you can get into bigger trouble. For example, after queen e2, like I'm wondering, is there some kind of knight d4? Apparently the best move is still a5, which now comes with a tempo, and a3 looks like it would be just creating all sorts of trouble. So for this reason, what Arjun may play here is that he may eliminate the bishop on f6 before taking on e3. But even in this position, after rook g2, Hikaru would get a lot of counterplay for the 2-pawn deficit. He gets up from the board again. So I actually sometimes do this too, where if I feel like my opponent's getting close to time trouble, sometimes I'll just leave them. I'll be like, oh, I'll leave you be, relax, have a long think. I'll be over there checking out some other games.
Yeah, just I'm not here. There's no game. You just think about your stuff. No, but seriously, the more Arjun is thinking, the more I'm thinking maybe he is not as sure about what's going on, and this 93 came as a little bit of a surprise. I don't know. Looks better and better for Hikaru. But yes, I think eventually we will see a5.
Yeah, still team A5 is still alive.
Well, you need that rook. You need to bring it up.
I mean, one thing we could have happen at some point is like a captures and a castles, right? That would, if you
Yeah.
take with the pawn, that would no
Yeah, that
longer
may
make
be.
castling dubious for me.
Although f6, yeah, f6 is always hanging
Yeah,
to the capture.
at some
So,
point. Some point.
and I mean, the pawn on f5 is less dangerous than on e6. It's just gets a bit dicey when you let the pawn so close to the promotion rank.
Yeah, I think Hikaru over the past couple of moves, especially considering that he went up on time again significantly, and he's getting those active moves in, he is generating some practical chances. Of course, we all see the eval bar, it's giving Arjun the advantage, but it's not the type of advantage where you just easily keep it and things don't change. This is something where he needs to continue playing precisely because Hikaru's pieces are about to get very active.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't correctly block the counterplay, you're going to lose your advantage very quickly.
Yeah, yeah, true. Well, so Arjun has an option of taking
You can
f6.
take here, or take the knight, take the bishop, move the rook. I think that's about it because otherwise rook g2 looks extremely annoying for white.
Mm-hmm. Well, do we have another game that we didn't see yet? I mean, Arjun is probably about to make a move. Like, he looks determined.
Yeah, he's got 6 minutes. I would stick with him, but I will say just by looking at the evals. Oh, by the way, I will say Nordebek castled short. The king did go short in his game, which is pretty cool. I maybe we'll show that real quick
Oh yeah, he did castle out.
because that was a cool move.
Yeah.
Right here, he goes boom question mark. But it's not a question mark. It's a question mark. Like what? Not like it's a bad move. It's like what? Castles? Question mark? What? You really could do that? Yes, you can look at this. This is one of the longest possible. Yeah, it's. I like it. This castles.
Yeah, it's a cat meme. Huh? Yeah, another thing that makes me surprised is what did Fabi do to end up in his position against MVL? Looks like MVL is doing quite well, but we probably don't have time for that. We can go to that game later.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just eval bar watching, and I saw Magnus has the eval bar in his favor, and VL has the eval bar in his favor, but the position, at least in this game, looks messy. Arjun has made a move. He plays rook g1 blunder. Well, not a blunder, but
Good
mistake.
news. Good news.
That's a little bit of a surprise. The rook g1. Well, I mean, it's not that big of a surprise. Hold on, I should take that back because it's when we see these variations and you're opening up this bishop, this diagonal, it makes a lot of sense. But we looked at this variation, right? So I'm seeing the engine give some moves like rook g4, but
Yeah,
what
I
we
mean,
were
this
looking
is a
at,
difficult move to play.
weren't we looking at something like this? Am I?
Yeah.
Yeah. This,
But
and
here
now we
queen
have here.
d6 is quite, I don't know, scary looking, no? Would you want to allow this in a game? Queen
No,
g6?
now I didn't see it, so I thought I didn't know I was allowing it. This is the
I'm
problem.
just getting really worried here because we are not
Where
getting
am I
that
moving
open
this?
diagonal. The bishop is not taking our knight. Our knight is not really attacking anything, but the bishop is hanging, and moving it away is not really an option because of f6. I guess taking e6 is one way.
Well, actually, I mean, this is inhuman, but apparently bishop h4 is safe. I don't know. Can you play f6? Oh, you have f7 after. Okay, I
have
was thinking if I
feeling-
go here,
Yeah,
your bishop doesn't have a square to keep the knight protected.
yeah, but
You don't need a
f7
square.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you go here.
and
And
take
this,
e6, queen e6. Can we stop the pawn?
well, let's see. Hikaru made a move. He takes it. He takes it. Queen takes. We might see this. Yeah, I mean, rook g4 was not a move that would be on my radar. And he goes bishop e5. Okay. Okay, so that makes sense. He wants to just eliminate the option of knight takes f6.
Mhm.
And he also wants to, well, I
Play
don't know,
A5.
perhaps he wants to play. I don't know if he hasn't played it, so maybe he doesn't want to. I want him to play A5, I should say.
Yeah, I think A5 is still a nice move, because if white plays A4, we have knight B4 ideas. And
We also
yeah,
have your idea,
king
Maria,
A7
right? King
and
A7.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
other point is that the pawn is protected when I move my king.
Yeah.
So imagine the rook getting to G8 and then to G2.
Yeah, as soon as the king is on A7, queen G6 is not dangerous anymore. We immediately can play rook G6, rook G8, and actually queen is almost trapped.
And I wonder if there's some funny business going on where I could stab the pawn in H2, and then I'll have my own H pawn. All of a sudden, my own passed pawn. This has been the past several moves have gone fantastic for Hikaru. He has not only managed to create counterplay with, first of all, he maneuvered the knight to E3, but also Arjun is now down to 5 minutes. Again, 30-second increment. It sounds like a lot, especially yesterday they were playing 10 plus 10. But that's the thing about chess, is that the pacing of the game is very important. Having 5 minutes when you started with 90 versus 5 minutes when you start with 10, it's a whole different feeling because you're used to the pace of the game. We see Arjun is spending 11 minutes, 10 minutes, 17 minutes on a move. All of a sudden, when you have to start playing much faster, you're a lot more nervous and worried and less accurate if you compare it to if you had just started with low time in the first place.
Yeah, and when your opponent has those extra 10 minutes, which he can spend in a crucial moment, and you don't have those, yeah, the dynamics of the position can really change. And I feel like Hikaru really felt the moment where to speed up, and I like how quickly he is responding right now.
Yeah, Arjun will not have that luxury to tank anymore. Just 2 moves ago, he spent 12 minutes. He only has a third of that on the clock. Let's see where he goes. Hikaru is not at his chair, so he is definitely leaving Arjun alone to revel in his decisions. But I think this is already a 3-result game, especially
Yeah,
with the clock.
I absolutely I agree. So he just played Queen F2 defending the pawn. He didn't like Queen G6 precisely because of the idea of A5. I mean, it takes long time, but A5, King A7, and then what do you do with your queen? Not only Rook G8 would be bringing the rook, attacking the queen, but also Rook G1 almost looks like a checkmate.
Yeah. But funnily enough, white can still castle, right? Well, actually, no. Now it's the opposite, right? Like you can't castle, but you shouldn't. We can still go A5. And if you go A4, right, to block my pawn, your idea is coming to town with the rook finding its way to the G file.
And notice this is the first time the bar actually swings over to the dark side.
Yeah, now it's teetering. Oh, 0.1 on the bar.
We're getting there, chat. We're getting there. And I think this is a good moment for us to take a short break because Hikaru has plenty of time and maybe we'll ponder over A5, but he has some other ideas as well. So we will go on a very short break and we'll be back very soon.
We're back, and there is so much happening. So many eval bar swings, so many blunder alerts in the chat. Every move here is changing the evaluation. Let's start off where we left off. Queen of 2, A5. Let's go. A5 on the board, Maria. What are we thinking about this one?
Yeah, we were actually pondering over whether to come back from a break or not, because it clearly was a very lucky charm. Every time we were like, okay, let's go back, blunder, and then, okay, let's go back now, another blunder. So we were like, okay, it's going well for Hikaru. Maybe we should just stay on a break forever. But yeah, currently it looks really good. So let's jump back. But like, I mean, yeah, after 20 moves, a5, good timing, good timing.
Better
Now
late than never,
Hikaru's
right?
gonna- Yeah, a4 is a threat, actually, like a real threat.
Mhm.
And if you play a4 with white, then black gets a chance to bring the rook over, and Hikaru's taking over.
Yeah, I mean, Arjun first played bishop a4. Now he takes the knight. Apparently, I mean, you do not fault Hikaru for bishop takes d6. The best move was pawn takes d6, which doubles your own pawns. But I suppose getting the access to the open file could have been very valuable. Instead, we get bishop takes, which is an extremely logical recapture. By the way, Hikaru now, he's down a pawn, but he's got the bishops. The lights for a bishop in particular has a lot of access to some nice squares. And now we get another move that just completely swings the eval to Hikaru's advantage. I don't know if he has more than one move, but one move that the engine really likes is queen f6, just going after the pawn in f5. Hikaru plays queen f6. He plays the best move. The issue for Arjun is that his rook is completely out of play. Hikaru has found a way to get his rook in. Arjun is not. The pawn in f5 is hanging. I have the two bishops. Your rook is out of play, as I already mentioned. So if I get this pawn back, I'm just much better. The position is so dire for white. The computer says you should castle anyway. Give me the rook. That is not a human move at all.
Yeah, indeed, I agree. I mean, we were joking about it for a while for both black and for white, whether to
I wasn't even sure it was
castle and
legal.
but sack the rook. Who's gonna do that? Only computer.
Yeah, and it's not that castling is a good move. It's just every move is pretty bad. And so it's like kind of like the lesser evil between all these different options. Arjun's got under 2 minutes. I think Hikaru, oh, is it zoomed in? I was gonna say, did he get up again, or is it just so zoomed
No,
in
he's
that
sitting.
I
He's
see like
sitting
like a 1 pixel of red, which I believe is
And he
Hikaru's
has
suit.
Sprite next to him.
Do you
Some
think it's a
sugar.
Sprite? Uh-huh.
Mhm.
So some sugar. Okay, a4 from Arjun. He probably wants to play king a2, but even if you do that, like the king is still not out of the woods. It's time for my favorite game, show the fake checkmates. And I got one right here. This one. With the smothered mate with the knight and bishop on the king. So yeah, a4 doesn't seem like it even helps get the king out to safety.
Yeah, I think rook g8 looks like a good move. In
Yeah, with
fact,
tempo.
yeah, it does. It does threaten to take both knights for a rook. And for that rook, which was out of the play for entire game, it's a good trade. Two
Yeah,
very active
Hikaru,
knights. He's doing something else. He's
he
taking
takes
on
the
f5.
pawn. That's very natural as well. But it was no rush. There was no rush to regain the pawn
I agree.
since white could not defend it.
It does make the Arjun's job a bit easier for a couple of moves because it's kind of forced. But Hikaru seems content with this decision. He's nodding.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I will say that despite, of course, we see the eval bar drops, but I really like Black's position. He's got the two bishops on an open board. Arjun
Mhm.
still has to spend a little bit of time getting his pieces. I guess now he could castle, by the way. But I think Hikaru just he smelled, he has the time advantage. He saw Queen f5 as a good move. Perhaps he just did not want to burn more clock to find if there's anything better. So I definitely can see why he went for this. H3 played by Arjun to get the pawn out of fire. The best move apparently was bishop f4, but I was thinking after takes, I guess it's hard for me to get my, can I not try to get my rook infiltrating your position? So it still looks very unpleasant for white here, but Arjun didn't even
Yeah,
play.
also I guess
Mhm.
the white bishop was attacking the pawn on a5, so it's a bit counterintuitive to take it out of there. Like it's one extra threat that you have for your opponent's position. But yeah, I agree with you completely. Like Hikaru played the entire game a pawn down. It's very hard to not to take it now when he's up the clock. All his pieces are back to activity. He has threats, and actually the knight on e6 is more of a liability right now because it's not attacking anything and it needs a defense constantly because it cannot easily get out of this trap which the two bishops are hiding.
Right. So the knight no longer prevents things like castles. Still, the knight has some utility. It's keeping pressure on a couple of pawns, preventing
Yeah.
rook f8. We can try the next best thing, which is rook g8, maybe rook e8 as well, to keep pressure on this knight. That looks a little more natural to me, although the engine thinks rook g8 is stronger. So but the knight here is very well protected. So funnily enough, the computer says you castle, you give up the pawn, but why are we giving it up? What if we go king c2? Of course, there's knight e3, but another very nice move, this actually, I like this one a lot, is h4. And the point is, this pawn is
Knight.
always going to be a little bit of a target.
Yeah. But knight g3 as well looks nice. Or rook g3 later.
Yep. Just pushing that pawn ever so closely to a future queening square.
Yeah.
Hard thinking. I think rook e8 is more natural, right? Because you were like, we could potentially even play bishop d5 next or something. So if we go here, again, like I need to get the rook in the game, right? So let's say I go king c2, bishop d5. This is just crushing. Your knight's hanging. Can't move anywhere except at 4. And after takes, rook e2, this is just game over. My pieces are swarming into your camp. I think rook e8 is very, very logical here. And very
Hikaru is
difficult for
about to
Arjun to
make a
beat.
move. He seems
Hikaru is
happy.
looking locked in. Arjun still remains calm.
Yeah, but Arjun is always calm. As a
Yeah,
cucumber.
inner peace.
Yeah, look at his heart rate. It comes right in time. We just saw briefly a heart rate.
Where was it at?
72 for June and 112 for Hikaru.
So Arjun is stone cold, right? He is
Yeah.
stoic as it gets, and Hikaru, he's pumping blood because he knows I don't know, he's hype. He's feeling the hype.
It's moved 28, but it really doesn't matter because there is no another time control.
Yeah.
This is what they have for the rest of the game plus the increment.
Hikaru goes knight to e3. Another okay, so that move's also really good because now you're just back to preventing castling. That's another really nice move. Yeah, you just shove this rook out of the game. If you take my knight, now I have a passed pawn and the two bishops. The bishops on this board with so many open diagonals, they're completely dominant. Okay, so this is also an excellent move. Very, very practical as well.
Certainly, well, I'm also nodding and Hikaru starts nodding. It looks very, very dangerous. The less time you have on the clock, the more difficult it is to make decisions. And Hikaru does just practically really good decisions here.
Yeah, I mean, can Arjun try to go for this pawn? Maybe this is an idea. This pawn right here. Apparently, this is just really, really bad after rook g8. So you cannot take on c7 without losing your pawn, your knight, excuse me. And if you play something like h4, okay, I'm sure there's more than one good move, but the computer says king b8, which is just totally cold-blooded. Defend the pawn. The problem is you just can't get the rook in the game at all. Like king a2 is always met with this check. And now the king is under fire. Okay, we're getting some moves. I don't want to miss them. Knight f7 from Arjun. Okay.
Yeah, for
Hitting
me,
the
it just
bishop.
feels like that pawn on c7 is not important at all. Because once we snatch the pawn on h3, our h-pawn is just marching through to become a queen.
Right. Well, I would think that one logical way to meet this threat is just to move my bishop maybe to g3. Oh, wait, I'm blundering. Wait, hold up. That's not very logical. But then wait, where do I move my bishop? Because even if I don't care about that pawn, I don't know if I want to give it to you. It's still okay. I mean, look, so this is apparently still fine. I'm down 2 or 3 pawns. No, 2 pawns because we got one back. But it's I wouldn't want to give you 2 pawns. Let's just put it that way. if I can
Yeah.
avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unnecessary.
Yeah,
Unless you see
apparently
a
bishop d5.
clear path to win, then yeah, of
Mhm.
course you can sacrifice everything, but it's just not necessary.
Yeah, the engine says no sacrificing. Give me a bishop. I'll take the knight. I'll target h3. And you still have your rook getting into the... This looks... Yeah, this does look very good, actually. Bishop d5 is a nice counterattack because the bishop, yeah, you have to keep an eye on both pawns. I was so focused on c7, I gave you d4, which is way more valuable, right? Because that keeps my knight entrenched on e3. Hikaru's got 4 minutes. Arjun's got 1 minute, though. Bishop d5 indeed looks very, very strong. I wonder if there's anything else he can play aside from that. Let's
Yeah,
see.
I like, well, I mean, I look at the suggested moves by computer and I see bishop d5. I don't think
Yeah.
I would think about such move
Immediately.
playing. Yeah.
Yeah, because the first reaction is, where do we go? Man of Sun is a good try, right?
Although
Hikaru-
maybe bishop d7 is something I would consider because it also hits the pawn on h3.
Yep, yep. It is also very similar. Now, if you want to move your knight, now my bishop can move without the d4 pawn hanging. So both moves
I like this.
are strong. Yep.
So okay,
Hikaru's
it's
spending a little
impossible to
time.
find.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, especially for Hikaru. I think even though he's getting lower in the clock here, this is a big moment. If he plays one of these moves, he's very much in the driver's seat. So it's worth the time if you can find it.
Yeah, one of those, bishop d5 or bishop d7, either will work. I think he's looking there.
Yeah, I mean, the other moves, moving the bishop, as we just like, you could, this is actually not bad. Giving up this pawn, like this variation here, the engine says black is still much better since you have the very active rook and the incredible knight and the h3 pawn's to target. So there's more than one way to play the position.
And most importantly, neither of the knights can easily get back to the defense of the back rank because bishops
Yes.
are controlling all of the squares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the knights would be deep in the enemy camp, but not really all that
Not really
dangerous.
doing anything. I mean, you can take all the pawns you want, but if black promotes a queen, it's over.
Bar's got 2 minutes here. He is putting all his, not all, but a lot of his remaining time into this very important decision.
Yeah, but it's a very important decision. It might just secure the game, but
Heart
maybe
rate's
this
up
is
again.
good,
I
good
just saw
moment
Arjun at
to
68, by the way.
spam the flower. What is he
Maria, do you
thinking?
see
He's
the heartbeat
calculating.
thing on our screens again?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
He's
How
going
are
up. It's going up by
you
1. I
come?
thought about this rook e8 move, but I was thinking that I don't want to lose my bishop on c6, right? So after 95, rook
Hmm.
e6. The difference here is that now after takes, we're going to get all this on the board. Yeah, we do. This might simplify
Yeah,
too much.
yeah, going into rook endgame is always smelling of a draw.
He will come out a pawn ahead, though. So it's not like, oh, but there's d4. No, but then rook. Hold on.
Well,
Hikaru's
do you
thinking.
have time for d4? The pawn is on e3 if you take the knight.
Yeah, but then king c2. Let's see. Hikaru. Okay, so
Hmm.
he wants to take on c5.
Yes, all rook endgames are drawn, unfortunately.
Hikaru's definitely still pressing, though. He's got the threat to Arjun's c5 pawn. Let's see. Apparently, Arjun can just take, which looks pretty scary,
It
right?
does
They're
look
giving
scary,
me...
but if he doesn't, then it's even scarier.
Yeah, that's fair. Even this position, there's some kind of like rook moves. Let's see. Well, we'll get our answer shortly.
It can
It-
look losing. To be honest, Now I understand the decision of Hikaru. It actually does look losing for white if they take on in the knight. The question is whether Arjun has enough time to calculate and realize that he can take.
Did Hikaru just get up? Where's he going?
Boss move.
Yeah, maybe he was just
Yeah,
he
if
just took
Arjun
off his
doesn't take the
jacket.
knight, I think white is gonna lose.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we're just gonna take on c5 next. You know, if you try to go king a2, rook c5, up a pawn. If you try to sneak a bishop takes a5 first, you're not up a pawn, but my activity is quite nice. Okay, so where do you go? He did do it. He did play it, and now he plays d4.
Played,
This was the
played
best.
all the best moves.
Yeah, now the king is ready to come join the fight. By the way, he could still castle. I don't know if that's something he would like to do, but it is something he could do.
Why not?
Move
He can do it.
34. Yeah, brings the rook in the game.
Yeah. And also king jumps a little bit closer to the pawn.
Yeah. Jumps to c1. Yeah, Hikaru
That's
now.
true. Whenever Arjun starts thinking, his heart rate actually goes down. So I think he is controlling his heart rate.
Yeah, he is not, despite the time trouble, despite the danger of the position, he is not phased. Okay, b6, I like that move. The point is that if Arjun is to take, king takes, now your king is cut off, and my king is actually making it to the center very quickly. So that's a nice try. b6. Arjun's got a minute to figure this out. Actually, taking on b6 is losing. The best move is just to continue going after the dangerous pawn. And after takes, you take it. Rook takes, king d3, rook e5, or rook e1. But this is the tricky thing. He's got 1 minute. You got to make sure you're not losing in this pawn endgame, right? You have to make sure, like, you got to calculate this whole race. He does. Did he calculate it? Or did he just feel that whatever may happen, this is what I got to do?
Yeah, no, I think he just has to rely on intuition here.
Yeah, he probably realized, well, if I take on b6, I lose. So
Yeah.
let me bring my king up.
History capture, right? Maybe the moves are just not coming through quickly.
No, I think he's double checking, like, is there like a d5 or something right then? I don't know, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Let's
No,
look
I
at
mean,
this line,
even the
not this
king
line.
isn't-
Let's look at this
even the
super
king
quick
isn't a
again.
square. Yeah.
What's happening with this endgame? So let's say, I guess you don't have to take it right away, but okay, you probably should. So apparently this right here, yeah, you got to calculate this out,
The
this
draw,
race,
right?
but, well, how does this end up? c4, this is still, we promote with check, which is very annoying. But black is the one who can push, right? Because I'm going to probably win your pawn. And
Yeah,
maybe
you
we'll
can
have a queen and
even
pawn.
block with the queen,
Yeah, I could. You cannot trade. So, you know.
and then king a3.
Yeah, check, take the pawn. Yeah, Hikaru will get into a forced. Okay, by the way, Arjun hasn't moved because if you cannot calculate that pawn endgame, you're just, what are you going to
It
do,
might
right?
look losing, yeah.
It might look losing, but that whole line, even though, of course, the eval, it's a draw, that queen and pawn versus queen, that is going to be a 50 move rule draw if we get there. So the equal evaluation considers that, you know, because that endgame is a theoretical draw, the evaluation is equal, but actually Hikaru is the one with all the winning chances, and Arjun's going to have to play precise defense. And I think it's forced, right? Unless Hikaru, I mean, yeah, you take the pawn with check, what could be more tempting? And now, you know, my pawn is running, so you need to stop it. And king b6, you know, I'm ready to come in and start gobbling some pawns. So I think that whole variation, okay, we don't have the rook c5. Hikaru goes a different route.
Yeah.
He wants to go after the h pawn, and then he'll go after the c pawn with his king.
Well, so we are back to 2-result game, but at least it's in Hikaru's favor. cannot be too disappointed. Hi, Chad.
And Arjun's got no time. I mean, this is
10
this
seconds.
is very spooky for him. Rook G3. Now the benefit is you can never take this pawn. I think.
Yeah.
If you ever take it, you're
very
easily
safe.
losing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just coming to take all the pawns. But H4 here for Arjun could be up. He does play it. That's a nice move.
Like,
Rook
come on,
H3.
the former world champion did a blunder in a much easier endgame than this.
In the final round, you mean? The
Yeah,
final
yeah,
game of the match?
The
Yeah.
Gukesh Ding reference, yeah.
Okay, we
You
get
can,
Rook.
you can make a mistake here, yeah.
No, definitely this is not over. Hikaru now is targeting the H pawn, after which the A pawn will hang, and the C5 pawn that he could have picked up earlier, he's saving it for a rainy day to pick up with the king. So it would be most likely that we end up in a pawn up rook endgame for Hikaru here, that Arjun will still need to continue defending. This is very much a 2-result game, meaning that Hikaru cannot lose, can only win or draw, and Arjun has to find the drawing moves with 16 seconds on the clock.
Yeah, it's very dicey. He has to really play very fast. And there is no additional time, even after move 40, which they are just approaching now.
Hikaru has to make a decision. Rook takes H4 is the natural move, since you do win a pawn. So you end up in a 3 versus 2. But, for example, Arjun could play rook E6, preparing the rook behind the pawn, and also preventing the king from going up. Hikaru goes, he goes for this. He's up a pawn. He's got the winning chances.
Yeah. Arjun can never trade rooks. It's immediately losing. I guess rook activity is important here. Maybe something like rook E7, rook H7. You have to really be careful because
Rook E6 looks very precise. Rook E7 is also logical to get the rook behind the pawn.
Automatic moves and you lost. Because C5 is also easy to win now for black. Or at
Yeah,
least
that's
it
why
was.
Arjun's move is so accurate, I think, because you just cut out this idea of the king walk. Or, like this.
It's impressive to find this move in such a time trouble as well.
Well, age-old wisdom, right? The rook belongs behind the passed pawn, so that works quite
But
well.
how far behind?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you don't want to go too far because now, maybe you have to contend with some king advantage. Apparently this also, it's still, so the drawing margin here is definitely.
I suppose he always can play rook h8 and then rook h5 after the pawn has to go one step further, and then he's defending c5.
Well, the funny thing is about this position, to be honest with you, is that if Arjun loses the the c5 pawn and the b2 pawn, and Hikaru loses just the h pawn, that's still a draw. Theoretically speaking, the A and C pawns in the rook endgame are not enough to win against best defense. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible to win, but it is still a theoretical draw. Now, obviously, I think if Hikaru gets that position, he would be quite happy to try to push that for a win.
Yeah,
because one
theoretical
mistake
doesn't mean actual draw.
Exactly. But there is definitely a margin of safety for Arjun to defend this, even though he is down a pawn.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that that specific endgame is also a draw. I'm still on my Philidor studying.
Well, I'll tell you what, I had that endgame actually maybe 2 years ago. I was on the it was an endgame where I had 2 pawns versus 1. So I wasn't up both pawns. I was playing an international master, and he had this 1 pawn, and he was defending it, but I tricked him and I managed to win the pawn, and he was very upset. And I was like, why is this guy so upset? It's still a draw. But then I was like, maybe he doesn't know. And he actually lost the endgame immediately, because once he lost that pawn, he just assumed it was losing. And after the game, I told him, like, this endgame is a draw. and he had no idea. So
He did not
you know,
really try.
yeah, he just lost. I mean, he basically was already resigned once we got there.
Well, he
because
didn't know. He didn't know the pattern, right? So then you have
Well,
to
he
figure
didn't
it out.
even know it was a draw at all in the first place, right? Because if I told you it's a draw, even if you don't know how, you would be like, okay, wait a minute, let me try to fight it out. But the point I want to make is that, yeah, maybe it's not the most well-known position and definitely not the easiest one to defend.
It's similar to the way Anna Muzichuk lost to Canero at the last Grand Prix. After a long defense, she resigned at the one moment where she actually had a draw.
Right.
Because she just didn't think that it's possible, because usually with a knight versus rook, when you're pawn down, it's impossible. But in that specific position, it worked.
Right. It was a rook and
Didn't
pawn
expect it.
versus a knight. So a very huge material advantage, but the kings were positioned in a way that
The rook had no squares, like it was on a short side, right? So you cannot, you lose the pawn as soon
yeah,
as
like you couldn't defend the pawn exactly. There was but
Yeah.
then she resigned. Okay, Hikaru
But-
rook g4. What's he plotting here? He's pushing the pawn, pushing p.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like rook can also defend the pawn on c5 from h5. But I guess he doesn't have to allow the king to go closer.
I think for Hikaru, like one plan could be like if he could somehow like get his king over to support this passed pawn, it could be good. But the problem
Yeah,
is
I mean
his
it's
pawns are
not
going to be
super
targets.
easy. If only if you remove the pawns on the queen side, then it's fairly easy draw. But now if Hikaru manages to swing over the king and infiltrate,
It's hard for Hikaru to get the king in the game, right? Because
Yeah.
it's cut off on the 6th rank. So then you need to start to like try to move over. But as soon as you kind of wander too far, I'm going to go after your c pawn.
yeah,
So for Hikaru, like maybe, I mean, it would still be a draw, but I was gonna say if you can remove these pawns and keep your pawn at a4, and
Mhm.
but we'll see. Yeah, Hikaru starts moving the pawn. I would probably, how do we do this? I was gonna say I would probably play a4 at some point to have both pawns defended, but the question is how is the king getting in the game? That's what Hikaru needs to try to do. By the way, Maria, we have a draw in the game between MVL and Fabiano. So there's just 2 games remaining. Hikaru against Arjun and Magnus against Abdusatorov. They are also down to 1 minute. Obviously, we'll stick with Hikaru for now, but so far, no decisive games have been played.
All right. Yeah, it was a very dramatic game between Fabi and MVL.
Was there some MVL had advantage at some point, right?
Yeah,
Or
at some point MVL somehow got an advantage. Don't know how. But I guess we can look at it later.
yeah, we will do a roundup once the games are finished. As Hikaru looks for ways to make progress. But again, the problem is if you go king c8. First of all, I was thinking about this. You can actually get completely shut down here in terms of your king. But here, actually, maybe I can sneak my way over. Although, yeah, rook h7. That's a nice move for white here. But okay, c6 is not necessary. I think I don't know where Arjun is moving his king. But the problem is he can just kind of hang it around. He can continue hanging around here. And as soon as the king starts making any sort of progress, you go for the pawn on c7. So I'm okay. So Hikaru goes c6. How is he going to get out of this? So let's say we have, okay, king a2 or whatever. What will Hikaru try here? I mean, if he goes here, he gives up the pawn. You can't really get much that way. What's he gonna do? I don't know.
Okay, John makes a move. Yeah, why would Hikaru want to win? What kind of question is that? Chat, think. Also, I think Kick is a little bit laggy, so I don't recommend anyone to refresh right
What's
now.
a little laggy? The
Kick.
oh, okay.
If you refresh the page, you might not be able to see the stream anymore. So don't refresh.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to miss the finish here. Rook c4. So Hikaru has an option of, trading the c pawn for the h pawn, but that would be, yeah, with the one pawn advantage is not enough for a win on the same side. But you got to try something, right? Why not? Got the extra pawn. It's a little bit of a free roll. This move
No,
also
of
sets a small trap, I would say. The trap is that if you go rook h5, wanting to defend the pawn, this is a losing move. Now you've activated my king. So that's why Arjun, he doesn't do that. He goes b3, says, let's make the trade. Go for it. I will hold this position indefinitely. 1,000 moves, and I will hold it. So Hikaru, let's see, what can he do? I don't think he will take. He's going to try to maintain. Yeah, there we go. How do I get my king in?
Yeah, you're really restricted from moving away from that pawn. That's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, even if we win both b3 and c5, it's still a draw if we have to sacrifice h4 for that.
Yeah, I mean, getting that second pawn would be quite unlikely at this point.
Yeah. Mm,
I guess Arjun, not Arjun, sorry, Hikaru, one other thing he can try here is he can also, yeah, there we go. He's going to switch the attempt here.
mm-hmm.
So
And
let's say
then
we
the
get,
king cannot be on a3 at least. Right?
yeah,
He
so
will go to
eventually,
h1.
yeah, well, here's a nice, here we go.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is beautiful. Yeah. I was trying to get there when the king is on a3, but it doesn't work.
This is actually almost losing because if you move the king, you get mated. And if you move the rook, like you give me a check, like there is, apparently there's still a draw because you have b4, but it's getting kind of dicey. Hikaru is considering, does he switch the rook to h2? Another idea is that when he goes rook h2, he can of course go h3, rook h1, but apparently, yeah, white's just in time here because what white is going to do is hide the king like this. Because if you move your king over, this falls to
Yeah.
the classic kebab.
Kebab, yeah.
What
Yummy.
does Hikaru do? Yummy kebab. He goes rook h2. Yeah, why not? Arjun does not blunder mate. He goes b4. Pronto. Yeah, if Arjun could not hide his king, then this would be okay. Hikaru is definitely going to play h3. And there's actually even something. There's multiple ways to do this, but a nice idea here for Arjun might be. Well, okay. Just got to make sure you don't have your king stranded in the middle of the board so that I check you and
Yeah.
promote,
I
right?
guess once the rook goes to h1, he goes to b3 and then b2.
Yeah, but another idea is there's king a5 actually, and if you continue with this plan, you're actually allowing my king to hide on c6. So now it's
Okay.
like now I don't have any danger at all. But I
Yeah.
guess Hikaru could maybe give a check and then play pawn h2, but this is a
Also
draw.
still a draw. Yeah.
Okay. But Arjun's, I gotta think. Yeah, I think he's probably gonna run the king back, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's hard to expect a blunder from him right now.
Well,
But it's never over until it's over.
it's got 20 seconds. Yeah, I'm trying to think like if you just keep the king here. Okay, what did he end up going? He ended up going king b3. Okay, so we'll see this on the board. I mean, my strategy will be, can I Like Hikaru will definitely either try to bring his king here or here. I guess the issue is I was going to show is that after rook h1, king b2 here, king a2. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't go king a6.
once the
king.
pawn is on h2, the king can walk away freely, except for a6, because on a6, rook takes the pawn with a check. But now it cannot take on c6, because then rook a1 will be winning the game.
The problem is
It's
I'm
weird.
trying to get this pawn, but if I get this far, like I can't zug you. Like you still have these squares.
You cannot get into some Zugzwang ideas, king d3.
Yeah,
I
you
guess
could
you
try to
just
get
need to-
like a rook trade type situation, right? Where it's like something like
Yeah,
this,
yeah, like
but it's
that.
still a draw. It's still a
It's
draw.
still a draw.
I'm gonna get
Or
opposition.
go with the king to c2. But the thing is, white king doesn't have to go to a2 even.
Yeah, I mean Hikaru will try something. I mean he's got no reason not to. And rook h1 creates the idea, so that you can lose this if you go king b4. Super careless. Your king has no square to hide from checks.
Uh-oh. But yeah, no, I like the idea with the king march to g7. And then the other way. Still objectively a draw, but maybe we
Yeah, the
have
most logical sort of attempt. Yeah,
Yes.
Hikaru needs to decide if he wants to play h2 immediately or try to move the king first. If he could, if he could win this pawn, he'd be winning. But Arjun seems to always have defense to it.
Yeah, the problem is that we cannot go to a6 because that's a check.
Yeah, if you could just go, I mean, even to be honest, of course this is check, but even after king b2, this is still a draw. So
Okay.
it just saves me some time, because I wouldn't have to walk my king here. Okay, we get h2 now. Now Arjun starts the waiting game with his king.
Mm-hmm.
And the other issue
Now-
is, Mhm.
Yeah, now we go with the king around, right?
Yeah, but the other issue is that even if we get, you might look very logical. Oh, I'm going to win. My king is going to go to g3. I move the rook and I promote. That's a very well-known draw, unfortunately, where I just check you. I just check you, and your king has nowhere to hide. You don't have any open space. So, yeah, Arjun will actually get a lot of time here because you can just rely on the trusty king a2, king b2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we could have had the pawn stay on h3 for that reason, so that the king can hide on h2, but then white has time to take a pawn on c6.
That's the problem. You can't have everything. Either you put the pawn on h2 and run the king, or you run the king, but then you lose c6. There are just not enough resources to pose legitimate problems.
Yeah, I love how chat is so knowledgeable and everybody's sure they can make a draw here.
Well, we did explain how.
Even when you explain, it's sometimes
It's
not
not
enough.
guaranteed, yeah. Well, let's see what Hikaru try. I mean, yeah, I think he's gonna try to go for this pawn, but just to see, hey, is there anything there? Like sometimes it's a draw, and you're like, let me just go there and see if there's anything possible. And yeah, as I was saying, even if you get the king, well, okay, I didn't mean to hang the rook, but you get my point. Even if you get the king here, now if I'm careless and go here, of course I'm going to lose. Now you're going to make a queen. But the problem is that I start giving checks. You cannot hide the king anywhere. And yeah, the best plan that we kind of seen so far is going for the pawn. The pawn is going to be well protected by the rook.
Okay, but let's try something. King c3.
What's the? Oh, here's the position. Yeah, so I think we'll see that, right? So you want to get the king to c3.
Ah, okay, yeah.
But what's the plan
We
after
can
we
try
get the king
first to go to g3. What if he forgets to give a check?
there? Yeah, just kind of like, you know what you should do? The real hack here is that you need to put the king. Like I would have played you. Here's the unethical pro tip: put it in the middle. then you make it a little bit unclear if it's on G3 or G4. Maybe even put it a little more on G4, and then when he moves his king, you're like, oh, it was on G3. I win.
Yeah. Well,
That's
I'm
the
trying to get to
thing.
Zugzwang situation. If king is on A2 and our king is on C2,
Yeah.
but
then?
of course he's not gonna play with a king.
No, but even then where do we go after king A2, king C2?
Well, for example, now king A2, king
Yeah.
C3,
I'm like, so let's say I go like,
you give a check.
wait, I
Wait.
don't want to. I
Oh,
have to
wait,
defend
what?
my
Oh,
pawn,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
So
forgot.
let's
Okay,
just,
rook H5 there,
but yeah, sure. King A. So what do we? So okay, they just
king
drew.
C4.
They did just draw, to be fair, but yeah, I just want to show like this position. Even if you get the king to A2, where's our?
Yeah, you're not
We
never
don't have
gonna
enough.
play king A3. That was my hope.
Oh wait, I don't think they drew. I think they're getting score sheets. Sorry, I thought I saw them like doing some stuff. I think they were grabbing.
Oh yeah, it's move
This was
60,
move
so they
60,
get
so
new
yeah.
score
So my
sheets.
apologies. They're still playing. Okay, Arjun is farming the great move symbols. But yeah, this is the issue. Like you cannot. There's just not enough. You can go king C3, check, king here. There's no rook move. Obviously, you drop the pawn. I mean, there
Mhm.
is this winning idea in some positions where, let's say I go here, and sometimes you could go into a king and pawn endgame
Mm-hmm.
like this, and if you can pick up the pawn, you could be winning. But here you don't even win. Here you don't even win because even though I lose the pawn, I grab the opposition. And
Yeah.
this is a known theoretical draw. You cannot force the pawn through.
Yeah, if the pawn was on C7, then it would be winning.
Yeah, but then they would play C6.
Yeah,
So then
exactly.
so there's always something, but
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's why Arjun pushed the pawn to the
Mhm.
to the limit.
Yeah. Both players' heart rates are calming. Hikaru to 86, Arjun to 59. He is zen.
It has athletic heart rate.
Yeah, constant state of flow and patient. And you can see Hikaru. He's coming to terms with the draw. He's shaking his head, a little bit disappointed. He realizes he had a great chance to win, but fortunately, not this game. But tomorrow, with the white pieces, he will have a chance to strike and get a win in the match.
Yeah, Hikaru. Well, I mean, you still got to try, right? Even if you know it's theoretical draw.
Yeah,
But I wonder in which moment was the most realistic one where he could have played bishop d5
that was the
instead of
big moment, of course, right? When he played rook e8. And
keeping
Arjun
the
did a
light
great
square.
job. Yeah, he did a great job simplifying into the endgame as well, though. So, and defending. All right, let's see.
Yeah, he's not gonna make a mistake here. Hikaru's gonna offer a draw soon.
Or they'll just
Still,
they
he
might
can
just
still
trade
trade
everything
rook.
off.
Yeah, they probably will still trade rooks and go to opposition.
Yeah, there's a chance Hikaru goes rook d1 here and then just stalemates him with the king and pawn just to get a little bit more moves.
Never offer a draw.
Yeah. How's is Magnus still playing? He is playing, and the eval bar is, well, I don't need the eval bar. I see the position. He's up 3 pawns, and that's why he's winning. Makes sense. So Magnus will win. Magnus will win his game against Norderbeck Abdusatorov, and in all likelihood will be the only winner of the day, unless something dramatic happens in this game, such as I don't know, such as the new CIA type detection that was being told about. Maybe we'll kick one of the players out. Obviously, just kidding, but it is definitely a draw.
Fabian Vale was indeed a draw, also a bit topsy-turvy. Indeed, in this game as well, Arjun was better at some point by almost +3.
Was
But
he? Was it that high? Really?
I think at some point it was almost, yeah, 2.5, 3. I mean, I don't know how much we can trust the online evaluation. Probably Sesse would say a completely different thing.
But in any case, the advantage was clearly with Arjun. By the way, we do have this Rick trade. I predict we'll finish the game on a stalemate, with King C3 being the final move.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think with Queen G6 was the highest advantage for Arjun when he played Queen F2.
All right, Hikaru will be able to win a pawn.
Again.
Again, yeah, he will regain the pawn advantage. Some questions in the chat. Yeah, tomorrow they will have a new game, new position. They do not flip colors on the same one every
Yeah,
day. I mean,
Hikaru
it
will
could
play
be.
with white pieces and on new position.
Well, we should
So
say it could be the same position. There's a 1 out of 960 chance of that happening. If they
no,
play
they
this,
remove.
sorry. Oh, they remove it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Starting
No
from
chance.
the rapid, they always draw a new one and they put the
Okay.
balls aside. They have a special stand for it.
I
I
see.
don't think they keep the ones from the first edition, from the first event. So I think after House they mix them all together again.
Yeah.
But yeah, they
Yeah.
remove the position that is equal to classical chess, and then they start removing one by one. Tiebreak, Armageddon, everything will also remove it from the pool.
That makes sense. I think it would be excessive to remove it from every tournament, right? That would be
Yeah, at some
bit
point you
much.
will get, well, how many you will get? Yeah, like you'll get like 11 removed from rapid, then up to 5 on each stage. Yeah, that's quite a bit, right? It gets up to like almost 40 positions each leg of the
And
event.
frankly speaking, you know, most of these players are already playing in the Freestyle Fridays. So they are getting the positions anyhow, but I doubt that having a little bit of, I mean, of course, I think it's more, the game is officially, of course, a draw. And we see Hikaru analyzing with Arjun. Let's flip over to Magnus as he's converting this. I've seen him convert tougher endgames than this one, so I'll predict the victory from here. But yeah, I mean, as Hikaru said in one of the post-game interviews that we had, he was saying, yeah, you know, I'll play these Freestyle Fridays. I'm not exactly analyzing the games after. So the players are gaining experience and you're noticing trends and patterns with some of the piece placements. But I don't think it's any detriment to the viewing experience if, oh, they had this position 3 months ago, now they got it again, or whatever, right? It's like they're still going to play a completely fresh game.
Yeah, it's impossible to like say, oh, in this particular position, this player played that and that player made a mistake and now Hikaru improved it with this move and that move. Like our brains should be like, I don't know, 10 times more capacity to handle this. But do you think this 3 pawns is enough for a win? We were like discussing one
for Magnus or for chatters?
2 pawns advantage. 3 should be plenty.
Yeah, I think the only hope if I'm playing black is like try to cheese some kind of stalemate, but that's what you see. I think the king is wandering a little bit closer to the pawns where there's less squares to axes, but yeah, okay, Norderman gives a check. I mean, there was, if I'm not mistaken, there was a famous endgame in the 2005 San Luis tournament that Topolov crushed the field and became the FIDE world champion. I believe there's a game that he drew against Anand where it was a queen and 2 pawns against the queen. So it was 2 connected pawns, like the H and G pawns. And Anand was actually able to make a draw. I'm pretty sure, I'm actually kind of willing to look that up. Why was that game a draw? But I feel like so I've 2 pawns has been drawn, but I guess 3 is going to be quite difficult. I'm trying to see the I'm googling the game. Maybe someone will beat me to it.
No, Zratnog. You heard it correctly. St. Louis was not really on the map back then,
Yeah,
but San Luis was.
yeah, something in Argentina. Okay, here we go. So I found a chess-based article, September 30, 2005. Here we go.
I mean, it was
Topalov
on
takes
the map
Anna to the
in the
brink.
world, but not on a chess map. St. Louis
Yeah.
only appeared, what, like 2016, 17, something like this?
Actually earlier, I believe 2009. I want to say 2010, maybe. I feel like they had the
But the big
US
events
Championship.
started a bit later.
Yeah, I mean they had the US Championship there back then, but now there's like the Sinkfield Cup and
Mhm.
we had the American
But big
Cup.
events like
Yeah.
the massive change, I think happened about 10 years ago
Mhm.
when Rex, I think he like signed a 10-year plan of how much he's gonna
Mhm.
support the chess scene.
Yeah, like and also of course the Grand Chess Tour. I'm still I found this article, but like some of these old articles that like the things get removed. I might give up pretty soon. I mean, I have a faster way to look at this on my chess base, but I'm trying to use Google. But anyway, yeah. Long story short, I definitely remember a queen and 2 pawns versus queen being a draw, but 3 pawns here, that might be a little bit much. A little much to handle.
Well, I Googled, and I think you mean 2010 actually.
No, 2005. I'm thinking in
Okay.
the it was I'm pretty sure it was round 2, 2005, St. Louis.
Okay. Because a lot of articles popped up for 2010.
Well, the thing is, in 2010 they played the World Championship match, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most of those games got quite. Oh, here we go. I found the game. Here we go. Yeah, it was a 97 move draw. Here we go.
Okay. Wow.
I got it.
Good memory.
Yeah. And it was 2 pawns, but they were not. Oh, it was actually 3 versus 1, and then it became 2 pawns. Yeah, so it was so in this endgame, yeah, Topalov actually had FGH pawns. So he had 3 connected pawns. Nan had this B pawn. He ended up giving up the B pawn for one of his pawns, and he was able to hold the second. But I remember he was losing, but he managed to save a draw. So yeah, but here Norderbeck is not in a position to accomplish this. But still, yes, stalemate's the only hope. Like somehow there's too many squares for the king.
Okay. Wow. This is taking time. That's it seems easy to win with 3 extra pawns, but Magnus is really taking time for every move.
There's no extra rewards for the quick win.
No. Well, I guess getting back home quicker, having more time before dinner, going
But
for another matcha.
Blueberry.
No, Magnus doesn't drink it with blueberry. But, oh yeah, Norderbeck just resigned.
Yep. And yeah, Magnus wins. Let's actually maybe go back real quick to catch up on what we missed in this game. I'm going fast here because I want to get to the moment we left, which is G4, right? This is around where we left the castles. So Magnus was up a pawn. As we see, he managed to keep this triumphant till the end of the game. But I guess it was just a systematic simplification of the position. Norderbeck went after Magnus as king. He's threatening some nasty stuff, but it wasn't there. King B3. The king is actually very safe.
Mm-hmm.
funnily enough, you give me a check now, I just take
Yeah,
it at
that's
A3.
how.
Or even go to A4 here. Oh, there's Rigby too, so not this one. So there's still a way to mess this up. I would have. But Magnus is king. Yeah, now it hides in A4. He's up tons of pawns. Rook C2 is a very nice counterattack. Did Norderbeck ever have a chance here? Not really. Just down tons and tons of pawns. And yeah, Magnus just converted. Yeah, so Magnus victory. And we will actually take a bit of a break. Obviously, the games are done, but we may hear from the boss man himself, Hikaru, if he's able to come in, share his thoughts in the game. But till then, we will
Yep.
take a short break, and then we'll be right back. And hello, everyone. We are back after a full day of action of chess. As we just reviewed, one decisive game was played. Magnus defeated Norderbeck. Of course, we spent our time with Hikaru's game. That was a very exciting draw. Hikaru was in a bit of trouble, and then he was in a great position, ends in a draw. What do you think about today's games, Maria?
Well, on one hand, of course, we can always look for more, always be disappointed about something that we had a chance to get but did not. But on the other hand, it did not go well for Hikaru at some point. Indeed, Arjun did squeeze for a while, and the knight on e6 was really a huge problem for Hikaru's position. At some point, it went. Apparently, it was almost +3 for Arjun. So, like, you can both be disappointed, but also find some good things that happened today. He didn't lose. He ended up drawing it from position of power. So I guess mentally this also gives Hikaru some advantage psychologically. And yeah, I think time advantage for Hikaru is also like something to be really proud of. He distributed his time quite well and only spent more time in the crucial moments, while Arjun definitely needs to improve something tomorrow. But Hikaru will be playing with white pieces. So nothing major happened today. I think Hikaru still has good chances to win this match.
Absolutely, and he will have the white pieces tomorrow. Another game of 90 plus 30. And if in case that game is not decisive and ends in a draw, the players will head to tiebreaker. Now, I know we have, wonderful fans and chatters here waiting for Hikaru. And the good news is that you can see more Hikaru today on his YouTube channel when he will be releasing his recap. In fact, maybe he's already pre-moved it. Maybe it's coming out. But yeah, we will have a chance to hear his thoughts on the game in the recap. And of course, we'll also have a chance to see him back at the board tomorrow. So game 2, day 4 of the Paris Freestyle will be tomorrow. Day 3 is in the books today. Maria, it's been a pleasure as always calling the action with you. And I will be
Likewise.
back tomorrow. Maria, you are on break tomorrow or?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
tomorrow I'm
okay.
going to be riding some camels in the desert, but you guys enjoy, and you will be commentating with Kanti, I believe. So I will try to tune in and watch a little bit, but I will be back on Saturday. But you guys should be here, same time, same place, 7 a.m. EST, 1 p.m. CT, 3 p.m. in Dubai. So my day might be already coming to an end by then. But yeah, it's been a pleasure always, and looking forward to seeing you again, Alex and Chad.
Likewise. Take care, everyone. Have a great day wherever you are, and be back tomorrow to watch Hikaru.